Craig, call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have received one other business item in advance of the meeting. It pertains to Coronation Park process and was raised by Councillor Marsden.
Any other OBs? Okay.
Item 1 is the minutes of the Council and Committee meeting held on Monday, January 16, 2017. Recommendation to approve.
So moved. Second. It was moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Reid. Any discussion?
Is that the minutes?
Minutes, yes.
I just had one.
Yes.
I just had one on the other business about the just one change. It talks about the member of council provided information regarding a letter from the District of Kitimat sent to the federal government, and actually was an open letter to Canada. And I'm just wondering if we can just change that in the minutes. That'd be awesome.
I would bring that to the committee. If they're accepting of this change, we can accept the minutes as revised.
Yep. I don't have. Anybody got any objections? No objections. The letter
The edit would be what?
would say it said the District Kitimat sending a letter to the federal government. It was actually an open letter to Canada. Says Councillor Zarella, and I don't remember.
The letter from Kitimat?
Yeah.
Well, the district of Kitimat sent that.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is a report of what the...
Yeah, well, it's the minutes. The minutes say that the District of Kitimat sent a letter to the federal government. Councillor Zarella was saying that the district sent it was an open letter to Canada, I guess, including the federal government.
Does anyone have a copy of it?
We did last week.
I don't have a copy of the letter, actually.
I might have it if you give me a minute.
For sure.
Somebody quick Google.
An open letter to Canada.
It wasn't addressed to anybody specific at the federal government, I don't think.
No, it's an open letter to Canada.
Open letter to Canada.
Point well taken.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Minutes as revised.
Minutes as revised. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 2 is the parking requirements for ground-oriented multifamily housing in secondary suites and single-family housing. We have introductory comments by the General Manager of Planning and Development and a presentation by the Director of Development Services. The report is before you for information.
Thank you very much. And General Manager here? Who's going to make a presentation? No presenter yet?
Perhaps we can move on to item 3 and
We'll move on to item 3. Okay. We'll come back to item 2. Item 3.
Item 3 is the Riley Park and Sheffield Park preliminary design considerations. We have introductory comments by the General Manager of Parks, Recreation and Culture Services and a presentation by the Director of Planning and Business Services. The report is before you for information.
Thank you very much. And hello, Mr. Alueva. I know this report is before us for information, but also for committee feedback. So you'll make a presentation first, and then we'll
Yes,
see what the feedback is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon. I do have not the Director of Planning and Business Services with me. It's actually our Manager of Parks Planning and Design, Andrei Azakov, who's rejoined the city after a brief absence. And he will be doing the presentation. It is his team that is responsible for the concept and detailed park design. I just want some very quick opening comments. As Council will recall, this Riley Park is a B priority, and that is the focus of today, and that is the focus of our work over the next few months, is Riley Park. We have brought Sheffield forward in terms of very early schematic thinking on programming and programmatic considerations on amenities because it is very close to Riley, and we want to make sure we look at both of these park projects together. They are complementary to one another in the neighborhood, and we want to avoid redundancies and make sure that both of those things are being looked at. So that's why we've also brought that forward in terms of early consideration. Riley Park was reprioritized in 2016, and there was a number of reports, including the one from planning. It is a priority project, and the concepts presented here today, once we get council's feedback or committee's feedback, we intend to go to the community for additional consultation that will further inform the more detailed work for that park. So with that, I will just pass it on to Andre, who will do the presentation.
All right. Thank you very much. As Raul mentioned, the intent of the presentation is to provide a high-level and early conversation around the type of programming that we see both in Riley Park and in Sheffield Park as well. So this is just a map showing you a bit of a context for some of the parks that are currently in existence in the northeast of Coquitlam, as well as some of the parks that are currently under construction and are some of the parks, the three that we're now starting to do some planning and thinking about the type of programming that we might want to see in Riley, Sheffield, and the D9 Westville property as well. So as you can see, both Riley Park and Sheffield Park, those are the lighter two parks identified there. They're really important in terms of programming for the Smiling Creek neighborhood and for thinking in terms of the recreational amenities that would be provided in that neighborhood. So Riley Park is a neighborhood park, and Sheffield Park is also a neighborhood park, but we are thinking of Sheffield as a potential for some enhanced type amenities, such as spray pad or a washroom to accompany the spray pad that could take the Sheffield Park into a neighborhood enhanced type category. The two parks are within a 10-minute walking radius of each other, so that's why we wanted to discuss the two parks and their programming together. We do see the two, and this is, I guess, important in the discussion, is we do see both parks as being complementary while still providing core amenities for each of the distinct sections within the neighborhood as well. And we do want to make sure that there's each of the parks provides supporting different varieties and diversity within each of the sections of the neighborhood as well. So Riley Park is a 3.5-acre park. It's currently largely forested. As I mentioned earlier, it is a neighborhood park, neighborhood level park. It is a fairly sloped and fairly steep site, as a lot of our sites are in that neighborhood. But that provides for a lot of opportunities, particularly when it comes to viewpoints. And I'll touch a little bit on the type of programming in later slides, perhaps slope play as well as part of that. So as I mentioned earlier, with the slope, there comes incredible opportunities for some view corridors. And from Riley Park, there are incredible opportunities for views down into the valley, into Port Coquitlam, and further up into Surrey even. In terms of the concept and some of the themes that we're exploring is this idea of rest, play, and move, and being able to provide all of those opportunities within the park. And I'll go through each of those. So for rest, we're envisioning areas of some viewing opportunities, so perhaps a viewing deck near the top of the park. We're envisioning a picnic area, some passive grass areas as well for some picnicking and just enjoying the space. For play, again, we want to do, and we envision perhaps seeing opportunities for some slope play. Again, we have a picture there from Queenston Park. We don't want to copy Queenston Park, but we want to try and do something original with the slope, perhaps with a different theme, but integrating the slope into the play element. And perhaps with that slope play, integrating some sort of a log jam type feature as well. And the intent is to provide for play value for toddlers as well as kids between the 6 and 12 age group. And the movement and making sure that there's universally accessible pathways, creating a loop system tied into the sidewalk around the park as well. With Sheffield Park is a 2-acre park, so it's a slightly smaller site. But because of its location, we do think it's a bit more centrally located for some of those enhanced amenities within the neighborhood. So same as Riley Park, we're seeing a playground with some creative play elements, some walking trails there, an open lawn space. But in addition to Riley, we're thinking of perhaps opportunities to add an older youth area for kids 12 to 16, some table tennis type amenities, perhaps a half-size sport court, and a spray pad, and perhaps a washroom to accompany then the spray pad if we do that. terms of the next steps with Riley Park, we're hoping, again, we're here to seek some feedback on the proposed programming. We're looking to move into later this year in the spring with completing the concept plan and seeking further public feedback on that concept plan. And then going into the detailed design with a budget, and then coming back with a detailed design and the budget to council. And looking at construction in the next year. Sheffield, sort of similar schedule, but being a year after Riley, looking at park planning with council input and public consultation in the fall of next year, with construction the following year. So that's all for my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. We have several councillors who have questions or comments. They are Councillors Reid, Marsden, Hodge, and Towner so far. We'll start with Councillor Reid.
Thank you, and thank you for this good work. I like it, but a couple of perhaps naive questions. You keep mentioning wooden platforms, log jam climbing. I mean, we're way up the mountain there. Are they not going to get green and slimy and require a lot of maintenance? Sorry.
We definitely have to make sure we do our due diligence in terms of the right wood materials and that the wood is treated correctly. But we don't see any issues as long as it's the right type of product. And there's other municipalities that have also experimented with wood structures, and long term they are sustainable.
Is there not, I'll say plastic for lack of another word, is there not some composite things that look just like logs but aren't really logs?
There's different type of materials, and we can definitely explore that. It creates a bit of a
maintenance because of the climate up there and the rain and what we've already experienced. So
it does create a different, the texture is hard, and the warmth of the wood is different, right? So there's materials out there that are imitating wood, but it creates for a different type of product. But we can certainly explore that.
Concerns me when you start talking about the cantilevered places, etc.
Maybe I'll comment. Actually, this council's directed us a number of times. I think when we did Como Lake, when we did Rochester, and a number of we've started exploring some of those issues, and not just the durability but the functionality. So we've done a fair bit of work. We'll continue to look at that and make sure that it's appropriate. But I think these are really great points. The treated wood still seems to be, depending on the wood, the preferred choice, but it's not necessarily our only choice, and we'll look at opportunities for...
It can get really slippery in the winter.
Yeah.
Okay, sports courts seem to be really popular. They seem to be the most popular thing, so I hope they stay at the front of your mind for when you're going forward.
Yep.
The thing that I don't see here, of course, is any outdoor pools in the whole of Burke Mountain Parks, and I get that they're not your favorite, but my next question then would be, when we go to build the community center up there, would it be logical to assume that we perhaps might build a pool that can be indoor, outdoor, so to speak, as you've spoken about many times?
Yes, we... As council, if council may recall, the aquatic strategy did not envision any outdoor pools in the northeast, or actually any new outdoor pools. There was some discussion around enhanced spray parks in certain locations, including in Blue Mountain and potentially in the northeast, in the village, to have some additional kind of play opportunities beyond the spray.
Swim in a spray park.
No, correct. The other opportunity was to look at the new indoor pool in the northeast could have some indoor-outdoor component that could address that, but that's something that we need to consider in the design. But it's an opportunity we have identified and potentially.
I would really like to see that because of the location. Because it's a very attractive amenity to have, but also because I think if it were sort of immediately to the south of the complex, you could have a great patio area outside. It would be a really nice amenity to be able to have it opened up in the summertime. I would like to know if the old games, like you have the new table tennis sets, are there other things like there used to be? What do you play on the cruise ships? Come on, Brett. Shuffleboard. Yes, there's shuffleboard, and there's, well, you and I cruise, so shuffleboard and checkers or bocce ball or stuff like that. Are you looking at those kinds of things for the adults?
Typically, during our public engagement process, we do ask residents for sort of others or other suggestions that we perhaps haven't thought of. Those ones are not the ones that often come up, but we certainly do look and listen to all the suggestions that we get.
Thank you. So last two things. Is there any point or any way that we could look at getting a little cookie cutter two-potty washroom system that we could just put in our park? Something that's just 2 spots, and they can be up there, and they don't have to be, male and female. You just be 2 spots, because I think that would be just as appropriate. But something that we can have, that we can make like a cookie cutter thing that we could start putting in our washrooms. And so that's just for if we could. And my last question is, because these are within a year of each other, are we doing these in-house? Are we going out for RFP? And last question, are there any cost savings into building them together? Perhaps not completing them, but perhaps doing all the groundwork and underground services and whatever else you might need together.
This perhaps is a better question for our strategic initiatives team, but we are certainly talking to our construction team about this. The thought so far has been that typically all of our park construction is managed by an outside contractor. So city staff would manage and oversee the construction that's done by an outside contractor. But we can look at whatever synergies are available in terms of...
And the costs?
It is a process. We try to do these things together. The challenge when we did reprioritize Riley Park, Sheffield was put a year later because of constraints on the work program. So it is important, and in fact, I think we've tried to advance it a little bit. It was actually supposed to be, I think, a year and a half later. So we're if there are opportunities, we would take those opportunities. But I think in terms of total funding availability and just ability for us to manage the various park projects, it might be challenging to bring Sheffield earlier. The idea was to make sure Riley gets done first. We will, however, look at those opportunities that you've raised, Councillor Reid.
And you'll look at the 2 spot bodies. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm done.
Very much. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. Some good information here. I know first off that you talk about rest, play, move. Is that something that I hadn't seen it before in any of the presentations? Is that something Parks is looking for future for all our parks? We're looking at those 3 basic components, or is this just a one-off?
In terms of the programming for Riley, we're definitely thinking about maybe a theme there, but certainly, those elements can be incorporated in every park, and I think that you made that point is absolutely, it can be applied and should be applied to all parks.
I liked it because it really says what we're thinking about. Again, some of our parks are going to be more play-oriented, and others are going to have more of that passive resting area. So that rest, play, move piece I think is good, and then you can speak to whether or not you're addressing it. So I'd encourage you to incorporate that to all our work as we move forward. You mentioned slope play in here. Obviously there is significant slope. When you say slope play, am I envisioning a Queenston Park type situation with regards to what we have there?
Yeah, but of course, we can definitely change up for example, the surfacing doesn't have to be flat, right? So if we were playing around with the log theme, it could be curved, or it could look like a log stacked up on top of each other on a slope. Yeah. The actual play elements, in terms of the play elements integrated into the slope, could be different ones, so they don't have to be the same elements as in Queenston Park.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't think you'd duplicate from the actual elements, but again, in terms of the movement up and down the climbing structure type sort of stuff, maybe a slide, maybe not. Some councillors might not want that, at least for a testing perspective. The success of Queenston from that slope perspective. This is again a neighborhood park. Do we have any thoughts that, again, with this type of stuff, that this becomes attractive and really, without planning it to be enhanced neighborhood, that this becomes enhanced neighborhood?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Actually, Councillor Reid kind of... on a basic level, neighborhood parks don't necessarily always have a bathroom or a washroom, but we've seen what happens with Queenston on a smaller park, where a huge amount of interest, and we get more people than we expected. So we definitely are going to be looking at the possibility of additional services here as we create more creativity in these kind of features that are so unique. yes, we become quite successful in terms of drawing people, not just from the neighborhood, as we saw in Queenston. And so we're definitely going to have to look at that. And the idea is to try and create, the use of that slope to make sure we use it in a creative and challenging and interesting way. So I think we could have those things occurring. Thank you for the comments.
So the success on that, I'd echo Councillor Reed's comments. I think this has the potential, especially given the size of it as well, to be an attractive destination, so enhanced neighborhood. And with that could come the need for parking. We've talked about parking in that area. There's a lot of housing in the immediate area that is attractive to young families. And so as we look at this, and one of the pictures you can see up Riley, there is a fair bit of space there. Is the intent to have just parallel street parking there, or has there been any discussion about looking at what's being proposed at the D9 site, the ranch site, where there's some nose-in parking? We appear to have the space.
Yeah, well, at this point, the plan was to have a standard road there. What we did with the ranch property is we did have to, cut in a little bit because the standard doesn't require perpendicular parking. It's something we will look at. What we'll do is we'll look at the total number of cars that can park on that and kind of make some judgments as to how it would impact the additional park space.
Okay.
But it's an opportunity. This is a very long boundary to have parallel parking, but it could be that a section of it becomes perpendicular. We'll look at that opportunity.
Okay. I just like that to be on the possibility. Again, from a parking perspective, the streets are well utilized in that area already, and so we're going to put in what could be a very attractive park. Let's make sure that we've got the ability to manage that success.
Okay.
And last, again, fitting with the rest components of what you're doing with this park, is this one where we would see Wi-Fi? I know we had a report recently about some Wi-Fi in our parks and that. Would we see this as part of the plan to have that city Wi-Fi here?
So typically with a lot of our parks now, or all of our parks now, we make sure there is infrastructure there to enable Wi-Fi in the future. Strategically, most likely we would prioritize where Wi-Fi is put in. So again, destination parks would be covered first. So this is this wouldn't be probably one of the parks that's on top of that list, but we always make sure there's conduits in place.
Okay, so the infrastructure would be there for future should that.
That's correct.
So when it becomes high enough on the priority list, or if a third party came in and said they wanted to partner with us in some way, shape, or form.
Yes, and so just to follow up, I think Andre's position is exactly correct. We've got other parks that I think are higher priority. That said, it doesn't hurt for us to identify what the cost would be now. If council wants to choose that, then we could certainly bring that forward and identify that as part of our next report. Ultimately, it does actually support, ironically, it does support park usage. Having Wi-Fi. It seems counterintuitive.
That's all I've got for now.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Point of clarification, then talk about RPM. Now, without washrooms, it's RPM. With washrooms, you'll have to double the middle consonant there, I guess. Councillor Hodge.
Okay. Well, I'm going to follow off on something that Councillor Marston said, and I think that's, in many instances, this is a case of build it and they will come. The question is who will come. Is it going to be just the local residents, or will it draw from a wider area? In the case of Queenston, we were a victim of our own success. I mean, people came from all over the Lower Mainland because of that slide, and then we needed washrooms. I like the slide. I think that that's a unique. That certainly is unique to what we did at Queenston. I'd like to see one at Riley, but maybe one of the sort of the curvy ones, almost like the slalom down, so that it's different. It's not the straight one, more like the lazy river. If there's enough slope there, we can do something different there. Washrooms, yes, particularly though up at Sheffield. And I'd like to see a spray park up there. The one at Galloway is very well used. Sheffield is far enough away that I think we could do another spray deck. But as soon as you put the spray deck in, people want washrooms, because then it does become a destination, and we learned that from Galloway. The two parks up in Burton Mountain that I constantly hear that we should have put washrooms in are Queenston, because people come for the slide, and Galloway, because people come for the spray park. That attracts people from not just the neighborhood. If you're just doing a tot lot, people are just coming from a couple of blocks away, you don't need to do that.
Yeah, so thank you. I just interject a comment because it's important to understand. I think any spray park we do from now on will have a washroom. It really I think was an oversight, and perhaps it was the idea that maybe these smaller spray parks might be just kind of shorter usage, but anyone who has children and who, it's just, you're going to need a washroom. So from now on, anything with a spray park is going to have a bathroom. But the other thing is the interesting comments around Queenston. What's supposed to be a neighborhood park with very localized need, when you create an amenity that is, the amenity itself draws from a wider area, then you begin to draw the need for more services. And I think this is one where we might need to think about what happens at Riley when we add these kind of unique hillside amenities that can draw people, and not just from the area, but wider afoot. What do we need to provide? And I know at Queenston, you have the portable, but the portable it's really an inadequate service over time. It's nice to have, and it's important to have over the periods of usage, but really we need to think more around, almost the draw of certain amenities within the park rather than the park designation itself.
That's why I said we did a great job in Queenston, but we created other unintended issues, washrooms and parking. Yeah. And, I don't hear any issues around parking around Millard Orchard or around Marguerite Park, but we hear about it around Queenston. So if people are walking to the park, fine. But as soon as we create a destination, even if it's not intended to be a citywide park or something else, as you said, by nature of what we put there, if we anticipate that it is going to draw beyond just the immediate neighborhood because it's got a great slide or it has a spray deck, and I want parks that are so good that people come from other areas. I'd like to see people do the park tour, sort of say, this Saturday, let's go to Blue Mountain Park, let's go to Queenston. And what we're trying to do is create these unique experiences at all of our parks. But in creating unique experiences, we create travel, and that therefore means washrooms and parking.
If I can, one comment on parking, it's important to understand as well. Historically, probably kind of 3, 4, 5 years ago, there were some park designs that really had very small frontages, road frontages, and kind of deep and kind of a lot of private edges or adjacencies with other residents. And Queenston is one that's, I think the design was older. It has a short road frontage. That is actually an important element that we've adjusted over the last few years, and you'll see all the parks that we have coming forward. They've been designed, in fact, some redesigns that we're doing on Partington and other new parks. Riley is a case in point. Large, we're using the road frontages there. The ranch is the same. The new one in Partington that you'll see coming forward soon. We're adjusting some of those to make sure there's adequate road frontages that surround the park, almost like a town square. It creates better access and eyes on the park. It creates a much better community. No, it also creates parking opportunities and less private property adjacencies, which generally tend to limit the usage of the park and create some conflict. So there are some adjustments we've made over time to deal with this issue, and that have other benefits. And you'll see that over time as parks come forward.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we don't have some of the issues around Galloway. Certainly there's the request for washrooms, but Galloway sits with houses all the way around it, parking on both sides of the street around that. So, I mean, there's issues on parking in Burke Mountain anyway. We know that. I wouldn't want to start putting in extra parking in a neighborhood for visitors and then have become the residents' parking. And that's one of the challenges there, is how we deal with parking in general. But to Councillor Marsden's point, if we create a park that people are going to come to, they need to be able to park their car and not compete with the residents and add to the stress that's already in that neighborhood. So I say yes to washrooms and yes to a spray pad up at Sheffield. Have we given any consideration to tennis? The one amenity that we hear often now is tennis courts, and I know they're better when they're clustered together, but that's the one thing we haven't done. We've done dog parks, we've now got some BMX, we've done a great job through all of our parks of creating different amenities, but we haven't done tennis.
High school, yeah. As council knows, we do have the tennis and pickleball strategy, and that should be coming forward in early March with the latest work. Part of the initial work did talk about, and we're kind of building on some of the components of some of the better work that was done. Components of that work historically was clustering, and the need to cluster. Otherwise, really the usage of those facilities tend to be limited. Our goal to date was to have a cluster of tennis courts at the high school, the future high school site, which is not too far from here, and likely it would be in the order of 3 to 4 courts, likely. So that is the goal.
Perfect.
Yeah, maybe Andre. Thanks, Andre. Put up the actual context plan, which shows
Where they all are.
where they, so here, it's not far from Riley, it's just across the creek. So we likely are going to focus our efforts there to have a cluster of facilities, and then you'll see more coming forward on the tennis and pickleball strategy report in the next month or two.
Okay, just want to reminding everybody. And the Wi-Fi was an interesting point about putting the conduit in ahead of time for the ducting. Same thing on wiring. When we go up and we hold the Easter egg hunt up at Galloway, there's always that need to be able to plug in a PA system and a popcorn machine and whatever you're doing up there. And so just to make sure that we allow for wiring for community events.
Conflict of interest.
Popcorn machine?
I didn't say whose popcorn machine. I just said...
But how many of us own a popcorn machine?
Nobody at this table actually owns it. Thank you.
Thank you.
No other sticky notes?
No, I got all my sticky
Always
notes.
got
Thank
lots.
you.
Dennis?
Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I just want to touch on what Councillor Hodge said about the tours. When my kids were younger, we would do that many days. We printed off a sheet from the website, and there'd be different themes, monkey bars or spray parks. And if the kids find something that they really like, you do end up going back, even if I had to drive across the city. Mm-hmm. And we would plan our trips around washrooms. We will go to this park next because it has a washroom. So I echo everything that's been said so far about if it's more of a destination, then we definitely have to have parking and washrooms. And I'm really happy to hear that from this point forward, whenever we build a spray park, there will be washrooms. Yeah. It's an automatic. I look forward to what the public has to say. I think this is great information. I look forward to the feedback. I like the sloping play area idea, again, using the contours. And it would be awesome to have something similar to Queenston, but different. Mix it up. So it's a different amenity. I also like the rest, play, move concept. I have similar comments to Councillor Marsden. And I just want to add on to what Councillor Reid said about the checkers or chess. I've seen the giant checkers,
yes.
Where it's painted on. It's busy in more of like a plaza. So I was thinking if there is a demand or a desire for the giant checkers or chess, that might fit better in the Partington Creek Plaza, if there is such a demand. Yeah. I've been to different cities where it's in there. People come out in their lunch hours and play it, and it's popular. But I have a question. On the Sheffield Park, it says older youth area for proposed programming, and I'm just curious if you could expand on, it's already touched on the sport court and the open lawn and the table tennis, so what would be included in an older youth area for ages 12 to 16?
So in terms of the demographic, we're thinking 12 to 16, and we're looking at perhaps providing a skate spot, perhaps just an area to hang out. So I think a picture there shows perhaps like a hammock or that kind of a hangout spot.
Okay, with their Wi-Fi.
So thinking about more creative ways of creating a place that would be, adults would be able to oversee, but would also create some bit of privacy or sense of privacy for the youth as well.
I wonder if there'd be any demand. Would a climbing wall be something that would go in there? Or so
definitely explore that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was just curious what that was.
That is the kind of...
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you. I like this report. I think the problem we're having is we've got our other municipalities need to up their game, that their parks are more attractive, so we don't attract them from all over the Lower Mainland. Some of the things on the Riley Park, I am concerned about parking just because with the development beside it on Riley, we have it fully parked up by the residents living in that area already. And I think that's going to cause a problem. And so you're only really that pretty much with Burke Mountain Promenade for some increased parking. So I do think there needs to be parking, but I do think it needs to be, I know you got that road potential piece where you're going to look with Brook Farm, but I think if you take a parking lot sort of mid, 3/4 point towards So it's not easily, so if there's a walking distance, so if it's right on either edge, you would maybe park there for those townhouses, but it's more further in. It would be more accessing for the park and moving in. So I do think there's going to be need for some parking there, just because the problems on Riley right now with all the people parking their cars all up and down Riley, that there wouldn't be any room, but people were coming here to park.
Yeah.
And the only part you got is Burke Mountain Village, and the rest would be, if it's going to be townhousing there, that's all going to be strata roads within there. So that's the one concern I have. I would, Councillor Hodge told me I'd like to see a slide, similar type of thing, a swirling slide in there. I think that'd be a good idea. I'd also like to see something like we have in Town Centre, the table tennis, the exercise equipment, and exercise equipment. Now you're talking about up at Sheffield putting in a spray pad, but were you thinking of a sport court down here or a sport court up there? I think I think you're going to do is pad up there, maybe a sport court down the bottom, or because I think you need to have that in that area for more adult play. Whether either one, you're going to need that in that area.
Yeah.
The other thing, did you think about on the Riley for maybe like a frisbee golf? It's a smaller area, but you can do a smaller thing within there. On the slopes, it creates a bit of challenges and stuff like that. So
that's something that I don't believe it came up in the discussions with the team. It's a fairly intensive, it takes up a lot of space.
Okay.
Is the challenge with that use, and we are working with a group currently in Mundy. So at this point, we'll put it out there. But I don't believe that if we look at this kind of the mix and size and space of the amenity availability for this park, that would be something that could be accommodated given the space that's typically required for that kind of a use.
But I like the design overall. I'd be quite interested to see what the public has to come up with some ideas. But I think for a 12% slope site, I think you're going to bring in some interesting things that we did in Queenston for a slope site. And I actually like the pathways and the walkway throughs there. So that's going to create very much eyes in the areas people are playing through. So overall, I like the design. I think you've done a very good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cirillo?
My questions are about budget. What is the budget for Sheffield? I see the $3 million for Riley, but was there a number for Sheffield?
1.8. So in the DCC program currently, it's $1.8 million that's allocated.
Okay.
Although this is, the original budget, because the DCC budget was based on the overall size of the park. So because the park is overall smaller in size, that's why fewer amount of money was allocated towards that park. So, but of course, as we get into the programming, we'll come up with an updated budget for council. At this point, our high-level thinking is that we probably won't need $3 million for Riley. So there might be some money allocated from Riley to Sheffield, because now we know that Sheffield will probably have high-level programming in it.
And just so if the idea, for instance, is we're going to have one sport court potentially across both of these parks. So where do we put it? Where does it best get located? If we decide that it has to go in Sheffield, we might be able to do that adjustment. The idea of trying to do a high-level schematic programming is that we begin to start to think about the budget and the budgets for both parks together based on the total for both parks. So we are thinking that way, and as we move to consultation on Riley, and we look to see the programmatic needs in Sheffield, and we begin to shape those together, and then we'll be able to make better decisions on both of these parks within the budget envelope for both.
So kind of to Councillor Reed's point earlier, if we look at it almost like $5 million for the two parks, and if we do them together and that sort of stuff. So
that's the idea.
So we should look at the envelope being about $5 million for the two parks. Because my questions were around when we do see the numbers come back, if we could get a look at the operating budgets with washrooms, with spray parks, without, so that we can make a decision about going forward. Because obviously, any operating budget increase lasts forever. So
yes, and it's a matter of routine now. Every park project we bring forward with detailed design, we bring forward an operating impact that would be added to the annual budget. We do that as a matter of course in all the new parks, and so we will bring that as. So what we'll probably see, you'll see after consultation, we'll bring forward a design for Riley, and then we'll bring forward a kind of not a detailed design for Sheffield, but it'll be a set of amenities that we're thinking and how much so we will shape them together. Keep in mind, Sheffield is not progressing at the same level, but we'll do enough detail there that could inform this, and we could work both together and coordinate both the amenities and the budget.
Reminds me just about the some of our learnings for the runoff and stormwater that we're going to have to budget for that. For
Yes,
these two really slow ones. So I don't really have any comments about the amenities in the park, but I was picturing who's coming to these, and obviously there's a school just to the west of the Riley Park. There's also restaurants there and a convenience store, and right now we're talking about doing the enhanced park north and the teen stuff north, and I'm just wondering if it's a better fit. I'll leave that with you, but perhaps it's a better fit. Also along the transit route is closer to the Riley Park, so if we were offering teen things, it might be
at the bottom of Riley. It's an option.
But I'll leave it with you, but it's interesting to know that we're kind of thinking of these two together in the budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go for the second round, I've got a couple questions or comments. First one, I was going to ask very similar questions or raise similar points as Councillor Zerillo regarding wanting to see what some of the cost breakouts in terms of, especially if we add things that aren't on the proposed preliminary design, such as washrooms and spray parks and things like that. We really have to know the capital costs and the operating costs. Good.
Yes.
The other question I have is just for sake of clarity here. This feedback is on the proposed preliminary design. So these aren't even preliminary designs yet?
It's more like a programming element. So these are even pre-concept plan.
Okay. So, but will these be the plans that go to the public, or will the plans become preliminary plans based on council feedback?
That's correct. If council identified something they really did not want, we would adjust those. But for now, we would take the plans that have been the very high-level concept that we've developed and put those out to the public with some additional commentary that council's given us.
Okay, that's what I want to clarify. I don't think council said anything they don't really want, but there's been a lot said about what they really do want.
Yes.
Will that be added to these designs to bring to the public? And if so, what exactly have you heard that you would add?
At this point, there was some commentary around the slope play, so we would emphasize slope play, and the additional that was not included in here was bathrooms or washroom services, potentially, parking, also the idea of some of the programmatic elements around sport court, integration with Riley, some of the potential youth space. There's some additional suggestions on outdoor recreational amenities like outdoor recreation, youth climbing wall. So we'd add some of those in terms of additional commentary and get some comments from the public on that.
Okay. Does council need to know exactly what is going to be added?
I can assure council that we will reflect the commentary from council as potential options, and then let the public decide and provide feedback on that based on the comments there.
Okay, thank you. Second time around, Councillor Reid.
Just quickly, since everyone's spoken, you keep mentioning we got to keep the slope. The slope's become really big, and I'm looking back at Kathy Reinheimer sitting in the back there and thinking, aha, park design. So if we have a slope, shouldn't we be taking advantage of it? Perhaps making a water park like a slide and a water park combined? Not as big as Queenston, but it could be something like that. And then at the bottom with a little plaza with some little tiny tot things that they can sit on. But so I guess what comes to mind for me on slope is using the terrain and then maybe combining the water park and the slide to make something that would be totally different in one park, or making like a waterfall and making like a little jungle idea or something, just something different using the slope.
Yes, and through the chair, we have done some of this in Rochester. There was some work done at the bottom spray park. There was some slope, some of the water that is moving down in that space. So we have done some of that. At this point, the spray park that is planned for these two parks would be in Sheffield. So we're not going to do the detailed design yet, but we will include it as a programming element that will cost out and we'll figure out. But in the future reports that come forward on the concept design for Sheffield, we will bring forward some ideas on how we integrate spray into a slope.
Thank you.
Thank you. No other comments? I need a mover and seconder.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Towner. All in favor of receiving this report? Opposed? Carried unanimously. I know we skipped over number 3, but I'd like to continue to number 4 since it's another park planning thing, so we're on the same theme. Might as well not be disjointed about these things. So we'll do 4 and then back to 2. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 4 is the Town Centre Park Master Plan Preliminary Report. We have interim comments by PM Parks, Recreation and Culture Services and a presentation by the Director of Planning and Business Services. The report is before you for information.
Okay. So my director, she probably thinks she's
laughing about.
She's thinking of some finance issues.
We're talking about finance.
We could make it one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate you keeping us up at the mic. Just for some high-level comments, the Council would recall that last year there was 2 reports on the Town Centre Park Master Plan. This is a priority project for us. Obviously, it's our flagship city park. Mundy being obviously our jewel. Town Centre is our prime, essentially developed active recreation and serves many other functions. Very important park for the city, and some time back we did put forward a proposal to try and better plan the long-term assets and offerings and amenities in the park to ensure we drive the right level of amenities at the right time and continue to build on the current levels of amenity there. There's both active field assets, recreational assets, natural assets, including the lake, cultural assets as well. And the 2 reports last year brought forward a terms of reference. Council will recall that, and also a report in the fall on public consultation from the process that we've had in the park, and that has informed now the preliminary report on the Town Centre Park Master Plan. This report is intended to provide some guidance in terms of high-level principles and also just give Council a bit of a breadth of the kind of options and opportunities that exist in the park. And I will note that there's lots of opportunities, but there's also lots of things to consider around making sure the park continues to breathe. It's not about finding every spot of the park and doing something on it. We've highlighted lots of opportunities, but the idea is that this park and the vision for it is ultimately going to have a carrying capacity in terms of total amenities and assets, and that should drive how it evolves over time. And we look forward to that discussion with the community and with Council. The report has been put together now through the work our staff have done with a consultant, and Michelle Hunt is here to go over that report and just get some of Council's feedback. And ultimately, we're presenting this for Council or for Committee for information, and then we'll go back and take the next steps once we get the feedback. So I'll just put that over to Michelle.
Thank you. This is actually a really critical point in the process. We've, been out and done the public consultation. The consultants have done, a lot of analysis on the park and looked at, previous materials. And we've, out of all the consultation that's happened, we've come up with these sort of draft guiding principles, and as Mr. Aloeva mentioned, just a myriad of suggestions from the public and staff and different stakeholders on what they think should be happening in the park in the future. So really key point in the process. After this, we're going to take your feedback today and then continue on, which is taking those guiding principles and turning them into a bit of a vision statement, as well as actually, the consultants are going to start drafting a plan and a schematic to look at all these things together and bring it together, and then we'll be back to Council and the public with that as well as a next step. So as I mentioned, through the fall, the summer and fall actually was the analysis phase, and just a review of a whole host of information. And then we had the public session in Town Centre Plaza in September, where it was really successful. They were there for the whole day. Over 400 surveys came in, which is quite significant for our park planning processes. And the consultants have now prepared this report that's before you in the attachment. So the first thing I want to sort of address is the guiding principles that they have suggested or proposed to get your feedback on those. 4 guiding principles. The first one being a place of destination. We think this is key. It is a destination park. It's the city's largest urban park. As Mr. Oliver mentioned, we have Mundy Park, which provides sort of a more, passive. It's got the fields as well, but it's a different type of park. This one is much more developed and really our urban park in our city centre. So we want to continue to keep that in mind as we move forward, that this is a place of destination. We want to draw people, both local residents, visitors, to the park. The second one, it's a place of connection. We have, in all sorts, this from sports, from culture, from just, families getting together to, friends walking the lake, the plaza. This park brings people to it to connect with each other, to connect with the community. And again, that's a guiding principle we want to build on as we move forward. Place of evolution. This is critical, and when we think about the history of the park and where it's come from, where it is today, and where we want it to go. And I think we really want to continue to recognize that. We took the first steps in that regard when we did the plaza, with the inscriptions on the steps of the plaza. Going right back and putting those inscriptions with key moments in time that have shaped the park. And I think through public art and through other means, we can continue to recognize that it is a place of evolution and educate people about the history of the park. And a place of celebration. Just it actually gives me chills. And when we heard from the public that came in, the pride around this park, and Coquitlam residents love this park, and so we really want to celebrate it and continue to celebrate it and bring people here and bring people together here. So those are the 4 things that I'm hoping we're going to get some feedback, the 4 guiding principles. The other portion, the key part of this report, is the proposed actions. And we got so much information that came in through our surveys, through speaking with people, through our stakeholders. And I think the consultants did a great job of sort of trying to theme these. And the themes were rethink, improve, add, and relocate. And obviously there's some crossover. But I just want to go through each of those and get your feedback at the end on some of the key ideas, because this is really, they're going to take these and they're going to take council's feedback and start, putting together the conceptual plan. And so we want to get council's, early ideas of whether or not we're on the right track or not. So as far as rethink, one of the things that came out was Trevor Wingrove Way. Should it pass right through the park? Should it, should there be more parking in the middle, or some sort of plaza in the middle, or, should we make it that pass through? And so I think that's something that they're going to explore more. It really divides the park in 2, and that's one of the things we heard people sort of saying, the top and the bottom are, operate very separately, and, we want to bring them together. So Trevor Wingrove Way is that sort of physical barrier, and is there a way that we can make the pathways and the roads function a little better to make it more connected? Southfield, right now that's a large grass field. Are there any other uses for that we could contemplate as we move forward? The central roundabout near the concession stand was another key thing that is sort of underutilized. Could it become more of a plaza? Could it become more of a meeting place? And then there are a number of gravel or just undeveloped areas, particularly over near the tennis courts and Inspiration Garden. What sorts of uses, we're going to need to rethink those and capitalize on those uses. Improve, here we just heard lots around washrooms, improve the washrooms, improve the lighting, improve the circulation and the pathways, make them more accessible. The playground in Spray Park, we heard from people they're dated, and we know that, and they're in our plans for future upgrades. The Spray Park particularly is in the aquatic strategy for future improvements. And then food services, the concession, another thing that really came out loud and clear as far as the improve. adding, again, washrooms. There was a call for, washrooms in the south to service sort of the people walking around the lake and the plaza. There's also a call for a washroom in the north to service the sports fields, along with, say, a field house or something like that. Food services, again, people want more food services, so that was an ad. Some people said, some people said more parking. Other people said rethink the parking. Others said no more parking. Let's get away from parking. So parking is going to be something that we're going to have to really critically think about. Lots of different opinions on parking in the park. And one of the things we're going to do fairly immediately is the event infrastructure. When we went through Canada Day this past year, we realized that we needed additional electrical power, those kinds of things, and so that's sort of one of our quick wins that we're starting to look at quite quickly. And lastly was relocate. Facilities like the works yard and the recycling facility, should they be in Town Centre Park or should they be relocated? The BMX bike park was another one came up, and we're just currently doing our Coquitlam River Park master plan that has some informal biking. So we've started to think, well, maybe the BMX should go to Coquitlam River Park where it might make more sense. So I think those are the key ones on the relocate. So what we're going to do today is listen to your thoughts on both the guiding principles and these proposed actions, incorporate those into, give that feedback to the consultants as they move forward with the vision and the conceptual plan, and then we'll be back with those before we go out for public consultation on those two.
Thank you for being very clear about what you're looking for and how the feedback will be used. We have several people that would like to participate in that exercise. Councillors Hodge, Asmundson, Reid, and Zerillo so far. Councillor Hodge.
Great. I like the report. I like the direction you're going with. I like the idea of the guiding principles. I like the idea of the separating to rethink and move. So I'm going to touch on a few things. And certainly the park is interesting, and having gone through the consultation process with the sport advisory group, being on site when we're talking to the general public, and there's a real difference in the park. There really are 3 zones, and I know at some point somebody probably planned it that way, or it just evolved, but there really is a sports zone to the north, the center, which is the activity zone, and then the cultural zone to the south. And depending who you talk to, you get very different opinions. Under rethink, you didn't on your list mention parking, although you've mentioned it. Parking seems to be a bigger issue at the north where the sports groups are, lesser so down south, away from it. I don't want to see more pavement there. You mentioned some people said they want more parking, some want less. I don't want more pavement in the park. But I think we have to rethink the parking. And the one that comes to mind is the parking right next to north of town center, which would be beside, I can't remember if it's Fridge Field or Mobilio Field, but that parking lot there. On the east side, it's very wide there, but on the east side it's a curb lane and there's no parking there. And whenever there's an event, there's cars parked there. Bylaws ends up going and ticketing because there is no parking there. And the other day when I was up there looking at it, sort of thought, why can't there be parking there? Why can't we put perpendicular parking along that side the same way we've done on the other side of the parking lot along TC North? Because it's all fenced, there's no structure. You've got the entryway, which is actually into the stadium, which is between the two. So I get that. You've got to have fire trucks coming in case somebody's injured and you need to have emergency parking. But there's a bit of a wide sidewalk there, a bench that nobody sits on. And to me, I think taking out some of those pavers and adding 4 more feet and putting angle parking there, and I think there's 40 spots or so on the west side of the parking lot. If we could put 40 more spots on the east side, if nothing else, if they're full, people aren't going to say, well, why can't I park here? Because that's what's happening now. Everybody comes in there and they just park in the fire lane, and that, it's going to be parking or it's not. So that's my thing on rethink parking. Trevor Wingrove Way, yes, it's it's a roadway. It in some cases becomes a divider, and it separates the park. And it isn't. I think we have to find a way that becomes a way to bring people together. And I think that possibly, you've mentioned in the report about putting in infrastructure for events. To me, that parking lot just south of that roadway, it would be a great place. In Canada Day, we set up food trucks in there. I think that what we should do is in that park go dig into the ground and put water pipes, electrical, everything we need, so that festivals could set up there. And then that way we can activate Trevor Wingrove Way. Yes, we can be parking when it's not being used, but I think that you incorporate that into your festival zone in there, using that roadway and specifically that park. I was pleased to see that when we had I now call it festival lights, but when we had the winter lights set up there, you put washrooms in there, temporary washrooms. To me, that's one of the things that we could put in there. Washrooms is also highlighted. I believe we need washrooms up north by Cunnings Field, and we need washrooms to the south. And I don't know if we want to put it right next to the plaza, but putting it into that parking lot, again, helps to activate that center part there, and again, that roadway. Let's see, just skipping ahead here. Fieldhouse. This comes up regularly with the sport users, again in the sort of the north precinct. There's long been a vision in this community, particularly in the sports community, and a vision that I like, and that is to put a clubhouse in by where the existing north office is. It's an office that gets converted to a concession sometimes, and I guess our staff is in there. And the washrooms are there. We've heard about the issues around the washrooms. I know we've recently replaced the roof. But to me, taking that building out of there, or rebuilding, and putting a 3-story building there, 3-story being a basement, main level, and an upper level. We hear from community groups they need storage. I'd put storage in the basement. I'd put concessions and washrooms at ground level. And in the top floor, I would put glass all the way around that could be a meeting room and another activity room. So that when groups are holding tournaments there, that can be their main office. So I think and that's been discussed in the past, and I think that's one of the visions that we need to on the north section. To the south, I like the idea of more food services. I don't know that what we're offering is what people want there. What I often hear is, why can't we have something like what they have at Rocky Point Park? And I say, well, that's more of a destination, but we are a destination now. And if they can do it in Reeves Park, in Reeves Gates Park, down off of Riverside there, in Port Coquitlam. If they can do it there, we should be able to do it here. And I think that something that becomes more of a destination, I'm not saying a restaurant, but if we were to do something like fish and chips, I understand Moby Dick may be looking for a new place because they're not getting Vancouver, but a destination fish and chips place. I think the people in the town center would come down to the park, walk around, have some fish and chips. They're not going to do that for a hot dog and a cup of coffee. The report here has some really good information about, and I guess it was the survey results. I'd be curious to know, it says, do you know how many people, I'd like to be curious to know, it breaks down, I guess, the people that took the survey, and it sort of fell where I sort of expected it to fall. But what I was really curious about is, do we actually have real numbers, other than percentages of the people that responded? Do we have a count on how many people visit the park in a year? I know we get for some of our festivals, but I'm really curious. Do we know how many people visit Town Centre Park? Do we have an estimate?
No, we've just recently have people counters, and we've been moving them around, but I don't think they've been in Town Centre Park for a full year, so we can extrapolate based on based on sort of, but it's so varied, right? The summer versus the winter, we've had them there for the winter lights, but yeah, that is something that we should put in the park.
Curious how many people come. It's got to be one. It has to be one of the best used parks in the Lower Mainland, and certainly becoming more so. Yeah. On the same, we mentioned a number of the events that take place here, very well attended: Highland Games, Kaleidoscope, the Beer Fest, Kick for the Cure, the Winter Lights. again, it would be really neat at some point, if we have the counters, just to get an idea on what the events are, what they draw. And I think that's important for planning as we go forward. We know it's a lot, millions, as the mayor said, but I think we need to know more. And on that, and just looking through my notes in the report, we talked about the field house, that's in there. Seating on the north side of Cunnings Field. This, again, is something that comes up quite often in the sports community. It's a natural slope there. It's almost a bowl. To be able to maybe make use of that so that when the stadium is booked or full, that we have that as an extra almost second stadium. And good. And that's it. Thank you. Good report.
Thank you, Councillor Hodge.
Just
one more point of clarification on something Councillor Hodge mentioned at the very beginning, talking about the 3 zones that have developed, sports zone, an activity zone, and then he said a cultural zone. I want to make sure that this report doesn't include anything to do with the Evergreen Cultural Center and its precinct, because that's not part of the park. Otherwise, I had a little difficulty telling that by all the little maps that are in there seem to include that. Can you just clarify what the consultant did and didn't do regarding the Evergreen Cultural Center and its precincts?
Yes, no, they were not included they identified them in the maps more sort of as a, location to orient, and key amenities. I think they included Glen Pine and some of them as well, and Pine Tree and Douglas College, Pine Tree Community Center. So, but they have not considered those in light of planning the park. Although we are doing some work on Innovation Center, and, so that we're going to have to dovetail those 2 together at some point.
Well, yes, that's true. But all the little maps, like on page 15 and I think page 10 of the report, when they draw the outline of the park, seem to was it not 10? It was certainly 15. When they draw the outline of the park, seem to include that part of the city, although that part of the city is not a park. So
you're right.
That's it should be clarified, because it's going to lead to the impression, I think, with the public that is part of the park. Well, how come we're not planning it or whatever? It's not part of the park.
Yeah.
Okay, so that should be clarified.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll go back to the speaking order. Asmussen, Reed, Cirillo, and Wilson.
Thank you. Good report. Your 4 points, place, destination, place, connection, evolution, celebration, I think they speak to what the park is. And I think the idea that it is a destination, I think some people living by the thing it's their own neighborhood park, but it's a destination park. We've gone through that. I think it's a good report overall. I think there's a lot in here, and I think there's a lot to do with budget over the number of years. There's a lot of ideas here that are going to cost a lot of money to do. So we have to look at as we get through this, we're going to have to come up with a prioritization, like we've done before, for the park, where we see the highlights, what's going to be needed first, how we're going to go through this. The one issue, though, that some of the issues here is the Trevor Windmill Way, partially closing or closing that. I have concerns about that and how we're going to do that, just because of when you look at the more major events, you're looking at traffic flow. If you're only having one way in, or that one-way road in, you're going to create a lot. If it's going to go all into Pine Tree, it would have to, because that's a more major road. It'd be a lot, because to put it out to Pipeline, which is such a narrow 2-lane road, can't handle it. But right now you have the disbursement going both ways. And when the park was designed, it was sort of designed in a split between the more sports-oriented zone and the more passive type of way and type of thing. So it was sort of designed in that thing. I think we can make some better connections across the plaza, across the thing, but I think the road has to be left open. I think we have to use it as a way that we could close it for certain things, but I think we need that road going through there. And I think the community would probably react to it being closed. I just think it would force more traffic onto either ends of it and out to, you'd have to go to Pine Tree, which would cause a lot of difficulty, especially for our major events. The other issue is that I've seen a lot of talks about parking. I think the park has a lot of parking within it. And I guess my question is, like, how many times, I guess only in our major events, that we are really no parking or out of parking, right? So, I mean, the only park is the one that the parking lot is by the stadium, where you come off Pipeline, and that little parking lot there a lot of people want to park just because it's close to the fish, but it's the smallest parking lot we have up there. So, I mean, the roadway, that's an idea within there. I mean, that was also designed with the curvature years ago, is that there's a desire for a new field house in that area, and the design of that curvature was also designed for that you could have a Tim Hortons or something like that cars could drive in, pick up stuff, and drive back out again. So that was part of the thought of that. There's also sports groups that are willing, through the Field Sports Association, to contribute and work together on a field house there for their contribution to it, for maybe meeting room storage or whatever. So, but that's been a long desire because the field house that's there doesn't suit the needs. It does need to come down. So I think the field house is a high priority for a lot of the user groups within there. That's something that's needed. The south field for potential recreation, I look at that field as being, as we grow with population, probably more used for active. We've talked about, I think in the parks plan, taking Glenfield out as we're not, as basically taking out and not using it as really the sports, but more as a passive field down there. When two parks so close together, we have to think about the amenities we're doing in those things. So I think more of the passive picnicking and open play would be better down at Glen, down at that part down there, since we've already used it that way and it's not being maintained as a baseball diamond. And this is the issue you're going to have to work through with the Field Sports Association and them. I mean, there was some pushback when we pushed this a number of years ago to drop it out as there was other things you're going to take that and then also take about Northfield, mixing it with recreation and stuff like that. It creates more damage and wear on that field for sports play. So I think we have to look at that.
Yep.
I like how you've broken this down into the four areas. Improve, I think there's some things that can be improved. They're going to cost some money over periods of time. I like the idea of moving the washrooms, especially upper close to the sports field. We've had a lot of talk about young women and women playing at Cunnings or some of the fields in the long walk to get the washrooms back by themselves. So there's a lot of concern about that. So I think those are some of the ideas that are also high that we need to look at. And to relocate, I agree with them. And I think the storage, the works yard, the recycling center, that plays into the need for a northeast works yard or a works yard on the north side somewhere, so we can move that and put it somewhere else. And when you look at a lot of these things in the report, I read through it, it said, recycling center, works yard, these are things that shouldn't be in a park. And moving the washrooms by the tennis courts, I agree, because that's such a far distance away from any other usage within the park. So I think it's if we get into that area. And I like the idea, though, when they come in, is better branding the entrances and better identifying the entrances and those key entrances, especially the community gardens, or not the community, the inspiration gardens in through there. Because I think it's beautiful, but a lot of people go by and don't know it's there. So if you brand it a little bit as an entrance way through, it'll get more activity and get more knowledge. Because once people do get in there, they find it very beautiful and very. We had an email recently about somebody discovered the beauty of that and didn't realize something from Vancouver. So I think you're doing good work. But those are my comments.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I'll try and go through quickly. I was here when the park was designed. I was here when the park opened. And Trevor Wingrove Way was put in for a reason, and that's because the park was so big that if there were any accidents, and it's quite possible in a place like that, that there would be, access and egress from two ways. And like Councillor Asmundson, I think that that's something that has to stay. It can probably be used in a different way, but I really think it should stay. I also think that if we're going to look at redoing anything to it, that probably putting out little stops where people can pick people up and drop people off, so little drop-off areas or something with a bench. The other thing, I think we're to the point now where we need our parking lots numbered. Because I noticed through Christmas, people would come out and, we forgot what parking lot we were at. And if you don't know the area, you don't orient yourself with a building or a tree or something. So maybe it's time we started having parking lot numbers. So just with a little sign, remember where you are. Yeah. I do believe that we need a field house, absolutely, at times. That was in the original plan. It never got built, but I know the sports folks are quite anxious to have that done. We talked about putting a restaurant on top. Maybe not, maybe so, but it's got to be something. I believe now that it's evolved to a spot where we do need a restaurant there. I personally would like to see it down around the Evergreen or Innovation Center, similar to what they do in Burnaby. Heart House is sort of a destination place. I think we're there. And I think with the SkyTrain, people will come out and have dinner and, stay or go home. Washrooms, I'm going to go back again to my cookie cutter. Surely there's some genius in town that can design washrooms in sets of 2 so that we could order 2 for a park or order 3 sets of 2 for a park or whatever and bank them somehow and going around. I wasn't in, well, it's because I've been here long and lots of other, but 16 pages of the consultant's report was about what was. And if he's going to do it again, just clip to 16 pages on the front and let him carry on. I don't want to pay more consultants' fees to tell me stuff that we already know. The concession area at Percy Perry, it never has worked satisfactorily. I think in programming we have to have a really good look at that as to how we give the concession license out and and get a better idea of how he's going to operate and what. In the programming again, Kathy's there, we're talking about food trucks and stuff, and I think, like Craig, that they should be, fish and chips would be good, there'd be all kinds of spots. But I do think there should be more trucks, more choice, and I think in the summer, starting at some date that only we know when it will never rain, that we should have, like we do for some of the big events, a covered canopy area perhaps that's just set up with the little plastic tables and chairs, and just every weekend, through the summer, have that going. And maybe we can have people, different nonprofit groups come forward and maybe offer to have coffee, hot chocolate, or wine or whatever in the certain evenings. I'd like to encourage art in the park night. That would be just a programming event. And again, serving something appropriate. Now, one of the things that I hear, because I live at Princess Gate now, is people go over and they're very good, the age group, it's a 55 and over building, but most of the people there are in their 60s and maybe early 70s. And they will take some of the people that are, in wheelchairs or walkers or whatever over to the park for events and that. One of the things I would like to see, and I'd like to get involved with our youth group that we have over at Pine Tree, I would like to see us get some little golf carts or some of those little things they have at the airport that could go from place to place and pick people up and drop them off at events. And when we have a large event, work something out with the kids that it can be sort of a money-making thing. Everyone tips $1 or something to the kids doing this. And it would be kind of fun. It would be a way to bring them into things. Washroom facilities, I've spoken about that. I think we have to keep something around the tennis courts because everyone knows they're there. And once they make a mad dash over there, if they're not there, that's going to be really bad. I do agree with Brent that it's time the work yard went to the northeast, and that should definitely go. Inspiration Garden, that is the most fun little decision, and the big B has been on so many brochures, and it's such a really neat place. I don't know if I really want to interrupt it to become a gateway, maybe beside it, but that little spot itself has grown into something quite precious for the community, and I don't know that I would like to change it. And on the last comment, I already said that. So I guess I'm just about done. I think, though, like Terry, the Evergreen Cultural Center is a big part of this space, and although we're not at this time including it, I think it's something that we have to remember that we can do. We have space there around it, and we can do something that might enhance the park. what we have done so far is probably beyond the imagination that we had back in 1989 as to how it would grow. I know the plaza is certainly not much. I think we always envisioned a fountain in the park, which we got. I think we always envisioned having the trail around the park and opportunities for outdoor shows of some way. At one time, a big thing with Evergreen was having a stage in the water, sort of, doing that kind of thing. There's opportunities, but we're well on our way, and thank you for doing the rethink. I'm quite impressed.
Thank you. We have Councillors Zarrillo, Wilson, and Morrison. Councillor Zarrillo.
Well, I'll start by saying that the community absolutely loves this park, and they love the lake, and they love the trails, and it was obvious in all of the research that they did here. I think all the parts are here. I think the consultant should do a second round of analysis, and I think that they should refine some of the pieces. I actually got a little disjointed and confused with the analysis, and I'll share a few of them. First of all, I'm not thinking about what's in the park because this is a guiding document for a long time. But if I think about guiding principles, I would want to see those 4 bubbles and have a total idea of the personality of this park. And when I look at those 4 bubbles, it doesn't pop out to me what is the shining light that is this park. So this park is pride and grandeur in the community, and I think that should be reflected in the guiding principles. So it's maybe a wordsmithing, but all the words are inside these bubbles throughout. But I think the words that they've chosen, destination, connection, evolution, celebration, are very generic, could be any park anywhere. Okay. So I'm just going to share that, Ms. Hunt, you said about wanting to draw people. You said it right in the place of destination that we want to draw people. I think the guiding principle is more than just being a destination. It's about actually drawing people to come out. So the things that popped out of me when I went through all the research was the park needs to be accessible to everyone. The park needs to be easily navigatable. The park needs to have more than its fair share of passive space, and that there is a desire for amenity enhancements, including washrooms and food. But I think one thing that needs to be way more pop is that it's an all-season park. That this is not like a park where you're not going to see anybody in there for 7 months of the year. This is an all-season park, and I would want that to be pop in the guiding principles, that we are programming this park all year long, and we want you to come here all year long, and this is our tourism driver all year long. So there's so many things in here that are mentioned. It talks about connection, but it's really about connectivity, but linking the residents in the city in the park and through and to the park. Like there's just, I don't know, there's so many words in here. We talk about pride and ownership. We talk about activity for all season in the place of celebration. Why do we put it in the place of celebration? It's all season is, to me, the all season is more important than, actually the place of celebration I like. But anyway, I think there's a disjoint of what, and we don't see the personality of the park in those guiding principles, because we can't just say, well, we want get rid of the BMX and we want to add this and we want to add that, because over time we might like BMX and we might not like ping pong tables anymore, right? The rethink, improve, add, relocate makes me very nervous. I would be very nervous to put that out to the community. The community loves this park, and I'm not sure that the ideas of rethinking, improving are maybe a little strong. We're evolving the park. We're enhancing the park. We're reinventing some spaces in the park. People love this park, and I want the community, when this goes out for consultation, to understand we're not trying to redo the park. We're not trying to overprogram this park. We're not trying to make this park something that it isn't already for them. We're just keeping it in tune with the size of the community that we have. But I'm sorry to say I won't be receiving this report today, because I think it needs to go back to the consultant for a rethink of what are the guiding principles that make this park the grander, the proudest, the most exciting park in the city of Coquitlam. but at the same time offers that passive feel that people love about the park. And I think the bullets of the summary of analysis, my notes were accessibility, signage for navigation, more passive spots with resting benches and lawn spaces, and enhancements for washrooms and food. It wasn't like rethink the park. And I think some of the councillors mentioned it, Councillor Asmingson and Councillor Reid. I'm okay with Trevor Ringo, but let's figure out how to navigate. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I really think they've done such good work, they should go through it one more time and have a rethink themselves.
Thank you, Councillor Zerla. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. On page 45, it talks about the third step of the process will be conducting precedent studies. And I wonder if you could elaborate on what is meant by precedent study. I think I know what it means, but I'd rather...
The third step of the process. The third step is the next step, which is taking what we hear today and developing ideas that they're going to run by the design team and generating data. I don't know. Do you want to take a stab at this one?
Yeah, and I think the task, what we tasked them with, was to ensure that that we don't generate design ideas. So they got these guiding principles, which we think are valid, and there's a whole bunch of ideas that have come out of the discussion about assets and amenities. So we've got this, assuming we get support. The idea would be that we don't want the consultant to begin to generate specific design ideas before looking at some of the studies around other large urban parks and what's been done and how that's been done. That's the idea behind the precedent studies. We want them to start to draw on some experiences around other similar kind of urban parks, that are key, that are central, that are kind of the kind of flagship park for our community, and some of what's driving some of the design ideas. So we didn't want it to be too kind of focused on us. I mean, they understand this park now and how it was created and how it evolved. But we wanted to now go back and start drawing on some other ideas in the field. So that was the idea, is to draw kind of in and out, kind of do an external check before we get ideas to this park.
So during that process, they'll look at the feasibility of, say, food service.
That's right.
They'll look at the feasibility of
Precisely.
a field house.
Right.
I think a field house is important, but that's just me.
That's right. So,
and I'd like to know if the field house at Gates Park is working the way.
And that's the idea, and the kind of interest it generates, the kind of activity it generates, the number of people that, they might talk to the operator in Port Moody, figure out the number of people that come through there, and they'll start to try and understand what supports some of these elements best, and how best we can, if we're going to do this, we have to do it right, and we have to have those elements included as well.
Okay, great. I agree with potentially moving the bike park, Coquitlam Park. I think would be great, and I would love to see an enclosed tennis facility, in that area. I think it makes sense to cluster it, and I think we could have a really solid tennis facility there. When people talked about moving the washrooms from the tennis area, I'm assuming we would still leave washrooms in the tennis area, but add washrooms elsewhere. It's not an either or, is it?
No, it's just bringing them further in so they can service both, people working around the lake, the events, and also tennis. So it's repositioning them a little bit, bringing them a bit closer to this side. So it wouldn't have two separate washrooms, but
tennis has tournaments and that sort of thing.
Yes.
They have the...
Yes. So for the first time, what we would do is actually look at all of the long-term amenities and assets in the park in the long term, and begin to plan the washrooms rather than kind of evolving them incrementally. To actually say, okay, we need them to serve here and here and here, and there could be 2 or 3. We definitely need one or 2 in the south, 1 in the north. We have to figure that out.
I really liked what Craig talked about in terms of, really, with when Trevor wouldn't go away. I think we need those parking spots. Really making them more multifunctional so that we could really, activate that area.
I think it's a fabulous idea. I normally, why didn't we think of that? As was my thought. I think which we did, but I think Councillor Hodge really put a picture in my mind to it. I think the idea was to create that space, and I think we've done it. Austin. Remember the Austin plan? Ridgeway was intended to be a festival street. That's the goal. I've seen some of these in action. I think the Partington Creek plan also intends to have this. And that can be a really, really positive way to connect the park and still retain, the access and parking. It's a great, great idea. A number of you have commented on it. I really support that, exploring that more fully.
But I think also you talked about making the Town Center Plaza area more infrastructure for that, and so electrical and all that sort of thing. Well, if we were looking at putting food trucks in areas for extended periods of time, I don't know how the food trucks would feel about it, but I think it'd be great if we had power for them, so they're not using their generators.
That's right.
For the noise and the pollution and greenhouse gas and all that sort of thing. I don't know if that's feasible, but...
Sorry, Jay, I'm just going to clarify. The additional power and water is actually going to be installed up to where those parking lots are so that we can facilitate the food, trucks in Canada. If you remember when we did the plaza, there was sort of the longer-term vision that had, had the spine down from Trevor Wingrove Way, and then it had another spine, and, it was sort of, we phased it, and so there was, the idea was that it was a sort of broader events area. But yeah, right now we're actually looking at putting the power and the water up closer to those parking lots, not actually in the plaza, but up where the food trucks need to be. Yeah.
Because there's already power at the plaza.
If there's already power at the plaza, yeah.
And the last thing was, last time this came to us, I had asked about the potential for swimming at Lafarge Lake, and I realized how that could totally change the character of the park. But I was surprised that in the public feedback, nobody asked about that either. Am I just weird? Or
You're going to have a bad itch, too.
No, but it was what I asked about was what would be required to make it safe for swimming. And, okay. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
On a high note.
You throw those softballs out there.
Yes, for water ski.
Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. Well, if you did go swimming there, you wouldn't be itching to go back, that's for sure. Just a number of items very quickly. Parking, I think the number one issue with parking there is awareness. You look at the north parking lot, it is, people aren't aware it's there, and it is highly unutilized. So I think I'll echo Councillor Reid's comments with regards to numbering of them. The second thing, I think you can make a significant improvement in parking and utilization of that lot if its access from that lot to the far east fields were more direct. So a trail down to the parking lot that Councillor Hodge was talking about, direct from the upper one, down to the fields by Cunnings, and it is very circuitous, and human nature is such that they're not going to make that direct path, so they will circle around endlessly and then park illegally. I'm not opposed to the possible parking revisions in that north central lot between the fields that Councillor Hodge had mentioned. If it's possible to make that work, that's great. Food services, it's like real estate, location, location, location. The location of the food services right now would appear to be okay to serve the water park and the things like that if it were ever open. Yet it really doesn't serve all the sports users that are there throughout the winter time, watching their kids run around in their shorts playing soccer. No place to get a nice hot cup of coffee. So, looking at food services, I think absolutely you can look at facilities to have food trucks in there for certain events. I don't think that you're going to see a food truck want to be there all the time. So you might have to look at a more permanent stance. And again, use Port Moody as an example with the fish and chip joint. Maybe a standalone can make it work. And to me, that's expressions of interest of somebody that plays in that space and say, what's the business case that makes it work for you? So that you're there providing services within a scope of hours that we want to see available to our park users. The bike park, the BMX. I look at that and think there's a great opportunity. Place for kids to ride their bikes. I think it's a good opportunity to have it there. Having it right by the plaza, to me, opens you up to the opportunity to have some of the BMX events that go along, where there's just riding in the, you can have the stage where they can have the music pumping and get some energy going, and then you've got a BMX park. You can have some trick skills going on in the parking lot, has been done from time to time. So I think that works there. The works yard, absolutely. I think it's outlived its use there, and I think that's space that could be better captured and utilized for other things. And that leads me to the Wingrove Way. I think it makes good sense for it to be there. Councillor Reid spoke to why it was there initially, and I think it makes good sense. I think it provides some parking options off of it. It provides access points to get into the center part of the park and for the events, so for anybody that's there. So I think that makes sense. Washrooms, I will remind you once again of the brochures I brought back from my first FCM. And when Councillor Reid says these things are there, yes, they exist. We're not recreating the wheel. They're not $800,000. They're cost effective. You've got the plumbing in place, or can have the plumbing in place at a reasonable amount, and we can have facilities that are there, self-cleaning facilities, so the maintenance on them is far better. We have to take a look at it, because I think that gives us an opportunity to have a number of them placed throughout the park in areas that we deem to be appropriate and necessary.
Are they handicapped?
Fieldhouse, yes, if others want to participate with it. Councillor Hodge has talked about a 3-story facility. I'll remind Council of the amount we spent on the Mundy Park Fieldhouse, and that was how many square feet?
It was $1.5 million, I think.
$1.5 million for a single-story fieldhouse.
Field, but probably
2,500 square feet?
Yeah, 2,200, yeah, something like that.
So to look at something on 3 levels, that's a big price ticket, unless you're having some partners in there at a significant participation level, whether that be restaurants, whether that be other players. I can't envision us spending $6 to $8 million on a 3-story meeting center at the center of the park. Inspiration Gardens has been referred to by people that live in the towers in the area as their front yard. I had an email from one non-resident, that had come here and referred to it as Bouchard Gardens.
Yes.
On the mainland. He just really felt that while it was small, it was absolutely stunningly beautiful, and the fact that we didn't make a bigger deal of it, he thought was a shortfall on our part. He really felt that it's there. So when you say gateway, using it as a gateway, I think you want to, when you go to the public, you want to be very clear, it's a pedestrian gateway, that you're not looking at putting a big driveway through there. To have a nice walking path and access, I think you need to be very clear when you go to the public with it.
Yes, okay.
And Councillor Wilson talked about the tennis courts, possible covered facility. If the report shows that we need more covered facilities, then this is an ideal place for it. I think clustering it with the ones that we have there, with the improvements of the ones there, makes good sense. I'll wrap it all up by saying, when you talk about the messaging when you go out there, we talked about this when the plaza went into place, that it had always been planned to be there. So this, when you talk about rethinking and improving and all that sort of stuff, what we're talking about doing is completing the park, is really what this comes down to. Okay. The plan has been to complete it. So with that completion, what new are we going to bring in to finish the vision? And in looking at that, what pieces need to be improved? What parts didn't quite click that we ought to make sure that we do it? Because it is a jewel, and we have to recognize it for what it is. It is many people in the area. It is their front yard. And that's an incredible benefit to them. Okay. Let's make sure that they've got a well-maintained back front yard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marsden. Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. Well, I really like the report. I think it's a good starting point to the discussion that has to go on. I just want to comment on the issue of swimming in the lake. I would love to see that. We used to do it when we were kids, but now that there's so much waterfowl, the water is quite foul.
And foul water.
Yes. Well, I didn't hear the comment. I had to step out a couple of times, so maybe it did get made. But on the question of daycare, we really need, as a society, to wrestle with daycare, and I think as a community to contemplate the idea of partnering. And so I look at the field house at Mundy Park, for example, as a lost opportunity. We made a decision not to, but there is a room in there that you can walk in there any daytime and you realize it's not being used and would be a great space. And so I contemplate whether, without some significant partners that play in this space, as Councillor Marsden suggested, on a three-story field house, I would contemplate that one of those stories would be the large meeting rooms that would be needed for the sports tourism elements that we want to do. But that's primarily weekends, and that's daycare. That's daycare during the day, and it's daycare that's completely surrounded by lots of park amenities, and therefore would be able to serve a lot of Coquitlam residents and essentially be funded. The construction of it would be funded by a daycare partner, from my perspective. I love the shortage of washrooms is an issue in every park, in many parks, and it's an issue in that park. It became the main issue for the lights at the lake, for example. It became so successful that I had written an email saying, okay, it's wonderful, we need washrooms. Because little kids, they've had their hot chocolate, and away they go, and anyway, I won't finish the sentence, but away they go. And so the solution that we came up with was really good. One of the challenges it created was, of course, one of the challenges the success created was the parking lot at Innovation Centre or Evergreen Cultural Centre, which was needed for Evergreen's programming at night, but was always full last night. I showed up for Emerging Talent, and the parking lot was full. And it wasn't full of the emerging talent folks. It was full of people doing the lake, because the signage wasn't out. So we're going to need a resolution of that for next time as we do the postmortem or the review of how the success of that program was and how tremendously successful it was. But it also created a challenge with washrooms because there's a beautiful glass window all the way along, lots of doors, and someone has rented the space for the evening, and people are knocking on the doors saying, can we use the washrooms? And from the point of view of I've talked to some of the staff at Evergreen Cultural Centre, they were reluctant to say no. They were reluctant to say, that it was apparent that it was, and there was a measure of urgency with some of the children or others, but they were sending them across the street to. So I think we really need to contemplate adding to that washroom wall on the northeast corner of Evergreen Cultural Centre, because the plumbing's there, adding some exterior washrooms and perhaps funding the maintenance of them through the maintenance of Evergreen Cultural Centre or through our park program if that's deemed to be more cost effective. I'm fine with the idea of moving the washrooms at tennis to the west side of the tennis court so that they become washrooms for festival as well, and washrooms that could be wayfound up from the lake, saying washrooms this direction, and then therefore you'd have wayfinding at both sides. From my perspective, that solves an awful lot of the challenges, other than, of course, the large amount of washrooms needed for a festival. And we should probably once and for all contemplate the cost of a commercial kitchen at Innovation Centre and use it to attract a appropriate partner, so that patio overlooking the lake, the best place for a restaurant in all of Coquitlam, could be used for a restaurant. It's simply impossible to attract the right person if we're not willing to fund some of the TIs, the tenant improvements that would install a commercial kitchen, and we're talking, 6 figures, but nonetheless, we'd finally have it properly used, and it would be a park amenity that makes a lot of sense and that would make a lot of people it would be possible to have dinner and the play and all that stuff all at the same time. And lastly, I applaud the adult equipment, exercise equipment, the adult play equipment, we called it. I pushed hard for that, and I love that it's there. I'd like to see some more, and perhaps interspaced around the lake, or I'll leave it to others. But I think that, and to keep it properly maintained so that it doesn't squeak, and so that it's all of them are typically functional, not always, but typically. And I think that was it.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I don't have much more to add. My main points were covered off. I just want to say I did attend the public information session back in September, and it was very well done. And I was looking at all the Post-it notes. There was so much input. I didn't envy the person who had to go through and summarize all of the input on the Post-it notes. But I wanted to just chime in about the field house. I would love to explore the possibility of getting a new and improved field house there. You know, people say we have a world-class sporting facilities. We want to host these huge tournaments, and I love Councillor Hodges' idea about the third floor with the glass around. You can look out, and it's a hub for tournaments, and then the space can be used for other, meeting space and storage and all that. So yes, it sounds pricey, but I would love to explore that. And I just also want to say, Councillor Hodges and I didn't even talk about this, but I was speaking with soccer parents just on Friday night. Soccer just started back. Everybody does park on that strip. The barriers go up now, the wood sawhorses to block people from waiting for their kid right at the exit from the stadium. Yeah. And it is wide enough that I do think we could add more parking there, because yes, people, they're sitting in their cars waiting for their child and parking there anyways, or running in for 10 minutes and leaving their car. So it's funny that you brought that up, because I had the conversation Friday night about that possibility. So, and that's it. Everything else I wanted to say is, but good report, great information. It's exciting. Oh, and I was at the park today for an hour right before this meeting, and I was blown away by how packed it was. Yeah. I mean, it really is middle of a Monday afternoon. It was sad to see the lights coming down, but it's such a valued amenity. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Towner. I'm the only one who hasn't spoken yet, and then no, those are points of clarification. And then Councillor Hodge wants to speak a second time. So while the subject is still warm, I'm going to continue from what Mayor Stewart talked about regarding the Evergreen Cultural Centre and the parking lot there. I've been to the Evergreen a few times over the holiday season to see different shows, and it's a really big issue. If we want the Evergreen Cultural Centre to prosper and succeed, we're going to have to protect that parking space, make it very clear that that's not parking, especially during the Lights at Lafarge Festival, which is going to be continuing.
Or SkyTrain parking.
And it's not SkyTrain parking either. Right. So event parking, SkyTrain parking. And it's funny how these concerns kind of overlap with the points talked about on the previous report about how if we make a park too good, this could be parking and access problems and washroom problems, and we're sort of seeing that here. We have a fabulous park, but the more fabulous, the more issues there are with the management of traffic and people. So that has to always be balanced. But the specific short-term issue is Evergreen Cultural Center parking lot. Huge issue, I think, has to be dealt with. Now, on the subject of improve, of your rethink, improve, add, and relocate, thought hit me, and I did share this with some staff earlier in another context, but this is a good time to share it, is with the amazing success this year of Lights at Lafarge. We have that wonderful plaza, the new Town Centre Park Plaza. Can we not think about reinstalling the canopy for the life of that Lights at Lafarge? So if we're going to be doing more programming and things like that connected with Lights at Lafarge, we already own a canopy. We put it away for the whole season, but perhaps should we not put it back up for the life of Lights at Lafarge, or maybe for the kickoff week of Lights at Lafarge or something, or something. I don't know. We've got that thing stored away somewhere. I don't know how it would do in the snow. I don't know. But seems to me that that should be part of the planning going forward to make better use in the wintertime of this four-season park, this key part of the four-season park, this performance plaza. So I'd like to see some thought put around that. Now, lots of talk about the Trevor Wingrove Place and Trevor Wingrove Way, rather, and and yes, it does pose a barrier to the connectivity of the park. And I said in meetings with the consultant earlier, I also said it in consultation with one of the advisory committees, and I also said it in a sticky note that I put on the wall during the public consultation part, that one of the things that I'd really like to see more is the better connection between the south and the north part. And it doesn't mean getting rid of Trevor Wingrove Way, but the better connection is not just so people can get from one part of the park to the other part better, but for the people who walk, and walking is a huge recreational activity. It's just one step up, or it's 1,000 steps up from just sitting there. Yeah. And it's easier to do than running and jumping and riding bikes and stuff like that. And a lot of people use the park for just going for a walk around Lafarge Lake. And if we can connect the southern part to have some path through Trevor Wingrove to the northern part and have some dedicated, well-marked walking trails there that, you know, take a walk past the sport fields and past the stadium and stuff, I think that'd be a huge thing. I think it would be very popular, very well used. Now, how do you do that? Well, who's been to Central Park in New York City here? Okay, they've got all sorts of roads running right through Central Park. And how do the pedestrians get through them? There are these wonderful tunnels, pedestrian tunnels, well lit, beautifully decorated, some of them, architectural features. And somebody might, well, if I hadn't referenced New York and talked about tunnels here, somebody might say, safety, you know, it's going to be dangerous. They've got these in New York, in Central Park. And obviously, they work there in a place that they used to have a reputation for being extremely dangerous. And so they work there. So perhaps we can think about one sort of, and it would be a fairly big project, but a beautiful pedestrian tunnel underneath Trevor Wingrove to connect the north and the south parts of the park. If there's better ways, low-cost ways, fine, but I don't want to, if people are thinking big right now, and three-story buildings is thinking big, and washrooms all around the park is thinking big, and things like that. So this is something else I'd get on there to think about. That's right. So no, I'm not suggesting a gondola ride from the front to top to the bottom of the park or anything like that. But okay, sorry. That's right. Zip line. That's right. So I really think making great use of the north part of the park for recreational walkers and things like that is huge. People love going for walks. Okay, and it's not just me. People.
Hundreds of today.
Other people. Okay, lots of people, dozens and dozens of people. So now I want to talk about the points that Councillor Zerillo raised. I thought they're very interesting points about how does this report catch the and properly reflect the fact that this is a grand, wonderful park that as it exists now, and it's very important. Certainly in the page 4 of the report, not your report, but the consultant's report, the introduction, it certainly describes that in a bolded paragraph and everything like that. But I think there is something to say about the need to underline that this park isn't broken.
Yes.
Okay? It doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be refined, improved, continuous improvement. And I think your report is looking at that, but I do believe Councillor Zerillo has a point in that it could be seen that, with rethink, and improve, add, and relocate, that holy mackerel, they're going to take everything apart and put it back together again, and this park ain't broke. It works beautifully, and it does need to be worked, so refining and continuous improvement, absolutely. So I would be careful. I'm not going to vote against receiving this report, but I do want, and then I'll get back to you after we finish the talking to find out what you've heard and how you think this is going to be changed in going to the public. But I do think we need to send out the message that this is a fabulous park. It's an important park. We're not going to rip it apart and make it together and put it back together again differently. We're going to really try to improve it anyway. And that's all I have to say. Councillor Hodge.
I just wanted to clarify, when we said 3-story, we were talking 2-story with a storage basement. So
you did say
the public may think, well, if it gets reported 3 stories, we're making that tall in the park. And again, this is a plan. We're fortunate that the previous councils and the Parks Department today planned. Now we're revisiting the plan, and so you don't want to create the expectation that these are things we are going to build. It's about planning for the future. And when I talk about that clubhouses number of people have, it's about making sure that the space is allowed for it, that the parking is designed in such a way that we're not going to dig things up or move buildings when the time comes, and that when we're doing the infrastructure, if the plan is to put a clubhouse there or to someday build a clubhouse, to make sure we put the infrastructure in place so that it can be done when the partners are found and the timing is right and when we find the money. And is it $6 million? Is it $3 million? We don't know that yet, because that's a whole separate process of designing a building. But I think at this part, when we're talking about park, we're talking about a park plan. And then I just wanted to clarify that to the public and people who may be watching, including the sports groups, that it's long been talked about. As chair of the Sports Advisory Council, I'm aware of that need, but it's something that's on the list with the other priorities.
Thanks, Councillor Hodge. Councillor Zerillo, second time.
I just wanted to mention, we've heard a lot of talk today, but we haven't had a lot of talk around the guiding principles. So just to follow up on Councillor O'Neill said, I heard it from everyone that the connectivity, the navigation is important, and I think that should be one of the guiding principles. And we've talked a lot about it being a place that you can go to all day. People are talking about washrooms and food. It's because we want it to be somewhere where you can stay all day, and I think that was a common theme that I heard from everyone today, that as a guiding principle, regardless of what comes in or out over time, that it's somewhere that people stay for a very long time. So I'm not sure today we really talked about the highest level of guiding principles that will drive decisions underneath, but definitely this connectivity, I think it's important.
Okay. All day and all year, actually, too, is another councillor talked about as well. So that's it for the comments. Tell us what you heard and how you think. What goes to the next step is reform.
No, and that's what I want to clarify. This is not going to the public now.
Okay.
The next step is that we're going to take this information and go back to the consultants and say, okay, we need to work on the guiding principles. This is what we heard from council. We need to start actually putting these things. This is what we heard from council. So you need to actually start, putting together a conceptual plan of the park. And what we heard was, don't break up Trevor Wingrove Way. What we heard was field house is important. So to take the things that we've heard today and they're going to build a plan on that, and then we will be back in front of council before we go to the public. So the public is not going to see the rethink, add, improve. Those were ways of us sort of categorizing all this myriad of stuff and post-it notes and everything and trying to sort of synthesize down into sort of actions. What do we need to rethink? What do we need to improve? So the next step is to take what we heard today and have another stab at those guiding principles. And along with the guiding principles, we actually want to come up with a vision statement. So when we come back, it'll be a vision statement and some guiding principles, and get your feedback on that, as well as really a plan, a conceptual plan like you see with any other park, with placing those amenities, talking about, what's important. I did also want to stress that part of the master plan is an implementation strategy that lays out the phases of improvements. We have $6 million in our DCC program. As you know, that doesn't cover things like field houses and some of the amenities that we need to add, lighting, etc. So there will be an implementation strategy that lays it out, lays out the cost, lays out the timing at the end of this as well. So
thank you for that. Okay, well, I'll accept the motion to
Second.
Moved by Councillor. I was going to say, moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Hodge. Any further discussion? Yes, there is. Councillor Mayor Stewart.
Very quickly, and I don't think there's a can of worms that is screaming to be opened here. The dog off leash question. And they really, I mean, it's funny, over the Christmas break, I took our dog to Miller Park, which I think is one of the most understated off-leash dog parks. It's just sort of, it's quiet, no one really knows it's there, and then the dogs come, they just have fun, and then they go away. Unfortunately, there is a portion of Town Centre Park that is considered off-leash dog by a whole bunch of people, and it's an ongoing battle, and it's an ongoing conflict between those users and other users. And I wonder if we need to properly contemplate that. Either we properly enforce it so that the other users can recognize that this is being respected, or else develop some kind of perhaps Miller Park-ish small off-leash dog area in that lower, in the southern portion, or third option, and that is the one part of the park that is not being used is the northwest corner next to the riparian zone that's fenced. It's a piece of land that we are not using properly, and we ought to properly plant it. We should plant some trees in it, for example. But it's that triangle that exists just north of the northwest parking lot. It's hard grass. It can't be used for anything else. In fact, the only thing you use it for maybe is overflow parking because it's such hard grass. But if you wanted a fenced spot, there's a fenced spot that we could put off-leash dog facilities, and it would allow us then to properly enforce a little bit more aggressively the off-leash dog restrictions in the rest of the park, saying there is a spot, but you have to go to it. I'm not sure where I'm leaning, but I wouldn't mind having the public weigh in on that. I note that only 8% raised that as one of the things that they wanted, and I didn't note the opposing position because I don't think it was asked, but it might be worth contemplating, and I suspect that encouraged Councillor Reid, our resident dog lover.
Councillor Reid.
Just quickly, exactly where the mayor's talking about, there's a lot of people, there's a linear strip right along David, right at the top of the park. Yeah. And that would be an absolutely perfect thing just to put, if we can just fence it, they can get in, they can run all the way down to the little spot that you're thinking of. Lots of people would use that because they can walk along on the outside of it or on the inside if they want. And that would solve our problem, I think. But elsewhere in the park, it's not to have a park that's used for all these other things, for food services and all. This is not a place for off-leash dogs. But I think having that linear one that can go from Pipeline to Pine Tree, and then in the corner up there would be perfect. Pardon?
Yours is a more ambitious thought.
People with big dogs will let them run. So
where are people doing it?
Thank you, Councillor Reid. And I would just remind people that just a block or two south of the south side of Town Centre Park, we have a very big off-leash area in Glen Park. Yeah. So if any sort of off-leash is contemplated for Town Centre, it would be the north side.
Yeah,
it would be
I agree.
Redundant to have something on the south side from my point of view. People should be using the Glen Park one. There's one at Glen Park, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of receipt? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
We're going to rethink it. Thank you.
Moving back to item 2. Item 2 is the parking requirements for ground-oriented multifamily housing and secondary suites in single-family housing. We have introductory comments by the General Manager of Planning and Development and a presentation by the Director of Development Services. The report is before you for information.
I think it's going to be better.
Hello. Thank you. See what happens when you're late? Should I make you wait for an hour, 2 hours?
Make me wait.
It was very interesting.
We've been waiting for 2 years for this. So
The wait is over. First, sorry for our tardiness at the start of the meeting. We appreciate committee moving on and PRC so ably filling in with their presentations.
Problem parking downstairs, perhaps?
No, we're in meetings, but we're here now. And it's been a while in the making. There's been previous reports and discussions with both committee and council around parking issues, and so we're pleased to come here today. I would note that this is one of the files that was transferred over about mid last year. Chris and then when George joined us took this on, and George has had a huge hand in really moving this forward, in working with other staff and other departments on this, as well too in reaching out and getting some preliminary discussion with our UDI liaison committee. And I note that some of those members are here today, probably watching and waiting to see how the discussion goes. So what we'd like to do, Mr. Chair, is walk you through a presentation that George has prepared. We're seeking committee's feedback at this time, and you'll note somewhat similar to how we tackled the liquor licensing issue area. There's a series of questions that have been set out, and if committee is willing, we could perhaps apply the straw poll voting if need be. But we really need today is clear direction from committee so we can take this away. If there's support with the approaches that are being recommended, we can take that away and prepare the necessary zoning bylaw amendments and then bring that back in bylaw form and move on with this process. So that's why we're here today. So if I could, I'll turn it over to George and he'll walk us through the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Now, part of the presentation is the series of questions. You propose to go through everything first, then go back to the questions, or as they come up, as each issue comes up, you're going to go through questions. How do you propose to do this?
My initial thought was that we could sort of try to go through the individual questions. Everything is all clearly linked together, individual questions. Or alternative, if it's council's desire, we can do just a quick overview quickly without looking at the questions and come back and go through the questions. But the initial plan was to try to get some direction as we work through, because some of the answers in the earlier questions have implications for some of the questions, the later questions that we proposed. Those.
Okay, so let's start by going through your presentation here and just take the questions as they come up.
Sure. Okay. So just as a sort of introductory comments, what we tried to do was sort of strip away maybe some of the, for lack of better terms, maybe some of the noise in some previous parking discussions. I found when I arrived here, I looked at some of the previous reports, they were kind of, perhaps could have been a bit more focused. We tried to focus what we believe are through the input that I've got from staff and what I've read, I think council's sort of main parking related sort of concerns and issues though. And just to preface, the presentation today is meant to sort of stimulate some discussion. There may be a few things in there which maybe not as consistent with some other thoughts in the past, but I say it's to stimulate direction and to allow sort of Jim and I and our other staff here, planning and engineering, to sort of get feedback from council and sort of ensure that we're heading in the right directions and eventually working towards some proposed zoning bylaw amendments as it pertains to parking, and which would then go through the whole public hearing process and those sort of things. So those are just some prefatory.
Could you pull your microphone forward so the people behind you can actually hear what you're saying?
There we go.
Yeah, no, I mean everybody's straining to hear.
Can everybody hear me? There we go. So the presentation summary, there's through the discussion, there's some key decision points that sort of we're seeking sort of council's observations, comments, direction to staff to allow us to move forward to next steps. Not that I'm going to bore you, but there's a bit of background information that we included, and the focus is on the two aspects of parking. Is it's a mouthful, the ground-oriented multifamily development. Basically, it's townhouses, row homes, and row houses is where the focus is. And some conversation on single-family developments, particularly as it pertains to how parking for secondary suites is currently being provided for the most part. So again, main questions for discussion this afternoon are with regards to the townhomes and row houses. Should multifamily resident parking be increased to 2 spaces per unit? As council is aware, the current standard ranges from 1 space per unit for the the RTM1 sort of, the fee simple row homes, ranging up to 2 for some of the larger 2-bedroom units, but not every single townhouse unit requires 2 units per dwelling unit. I know it's a topic dear and near to council is, should some multifamily parking be allowed in tandem and counted as 2 spaces? Like I say, it's presentation intended to stimulate discussion this afternoon. In terms of the single-family piece, should secondary suite parking be allowed in tandem on driveways, which is typically how it's being delivered today? And we've got a number of applications sort of going through the process now, which are providing parking in a variety of ways. So the question is, should our in-stream applications perhaps be exempted from any changes that council might make and entertain as we go through the process over the next several months. Quickly, I'm not going to bore you. Parking bylaw not been updated for about 10 years. Some issues regarding parking supply concerns from folks up in the Northeast. Critical piece here, back in December 2011, the local street standard width was increased from 8 meters to 8.5 meters, which facilitated parking on both sides of the street. Some of the newer or the original neighborhoods up in the mountain, as you know, only have parking on one side of the street, which have caused some issues with parking supply up there. Just over the last year, some December of 2015, that's 2 years ago now almost, Northeast Coquitlam Parking Review, a progress report presented by staff. And in spring of last year, there was some further information provided to our council and committee on the citywide parking review of ground-oriented multifamily developments and single-family homes. So we thought that was sort of a mouthful of a title, so we tried to compress it a bit. And then just in terms of the process, as Jim had pointed out earlier, there was quite a bit of interest on behalf of UDI in the whole parking issue in Coquitlam. So on November 4th, let me back up a bit. Back in October, there was a larger City of Coquitlam UDI liaison meeting. And through that conversation, we had talked about looking at the parking for townhouses and secondary suites, and there was quite a bit of interest on behalf of UDI staff. So through that, there was a smaller UDI parking subcommittee created to sort of where we can bounce ideas off each other and get some feedback and some ideas that we had. And that meeting took place in early November of last year. So some of the information that we've provided today, I guess all of it has had input of UDI and sort of tried to respond to some of their concerns, but at the same time be mindful of the bigger parking supply issues, particularly in Northeast. Just a quick slide on sort of the existing parking standards. I'm not going to bore you too much, but for for the multifamily stuff, the ground-oriented stuff ranges from 1 space per unit for the row homes, up to two spaces per unit for the larger 2-bedroom and plus units. Single-family houses, 2 spaces per house with 1. And if there's a secondary suite, one space. Just one thing I'd like to point out as we go through the thing, we specifically excluded this current review. We've excluded the transit-oriented development areas. Council went through a process, as I understand, a number of years ago, and nailed down some more sort of specific parking requirements of those. The areas which are well served by SkyTrain. So this is more pertains to, shall we call it, the more suburban parts of town. So let's go right into the ground-oriented stuff here. So what we've done to the presentations is we've gone through sort of some ideas with the pros and cons of the ideas that we're presenting, and then the subsequent side, we were much more direct and sort of asking council sort of, what's your feelings about the specific items, and with a sort of a staff recommendation of some directions. So with the one of the key suggestions that staff are proposing, and this is based upon a lot of feedback that we've received, over the last period of time, is that all ground-oriented multifamily housing, just whether it's 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, or otherwise, should go up to 2 spaces per unit. And we've tried to lay out the pros and cons, consistent with council's previous feedback and applications, consistent with the municipal can. Part of our work, what we did was we looked at sort of how different municipalities in Metro Vancouver, who are similar to Coquitlam, deal with parking, and for the most part, they require 2 spaces per unit. And with the 2 spaces per unit, in terms of another pro is that, it's, in theory, it should reduce the demand for on-street parking. Now, increasing the 2 does have a few downsides as well. We might see fewer infill application housing choices areas because, as you know, in those areas, some of the areas get sort of constrained, and if you don't have a lane, it's more difficult to provide that additional parking. But with all 2-car, we might see, some more larger units, but with the larger units, there's that whole affordability piece which has to be factored into the equation. And then from a developer's point of view, as UDI has reminded us, is that could result in lower unit yields. So, the first question that we'd like some direction on from council is, should the resident parking requirements for all our ground-oriented housing be increased to 2 spaces per dwelling unit? Staff's recommendation is yes, for the reasons outlined, and we can have a conversation.
Thank you. Yes, there are some councillors, including myself, who want to speak on this before we have the show of hands. So far, Marsden, Hodge, Reid, Wilson, and me. So, Asmussen. Go ahead, Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. So I'll just start with a couple of quick comments here. I'd like to say I'm thrilled to see this come to us today, but in actual fact, I would have been thrilled to see this come to us a year ago or 8 months ago. The lag time on this, given the number of times council has mentioned it over and over again, is concerning to me. But I appreciate where we're at with it now. So the question I would have is, what do we see as far as timing? We give answers today. When do we see a final report and where we would actually see a bylaw that we would be voting on for implementation? 3 months? 1 month? 12 more months?
2 weeks.
Appreciating that a number of the pieces that we've had civic lands have come to market and the information has been out there to let developers know that there's a lot of talk about going towards this too. So there's been a lot of discussion out there. But when will we see these are the new rules?
Yeah, and again, we are sorry for the delay in getting it back before committee, but there were staffing factors involved with that too. So, again, I think it depends kind of on the nature of the discussion and feedback today. We've tried to focus these so there's the opportunity for clear input. And with that, we can take that away and make it a priority and draft the bylaw. George has got Chris Jarvis assisting with this. We've also got one of our usual consultants that helps out with policy work. He's on board. Engineering staff have played a big role in this as well. So we are structured to move on this if that's the direction we get today.
Okay, so if we give you direction on this today where it's very clear, you get firm yes or no answers on each of these?
Couple months.
Couple months.
I just to add to Jim's comment, Councillor Morrison, our target would be to get something back to council in terms of the regular council report, and hopefully we can move on to public hearing. And I jotted on here, if I do my math correctly, by the end of the first trimester, which would give us to sort of towards the latter part of April.
Which is the end of April. End of April.
Okay. We like I say, we can shuffle some other work around, and depending upon council's sort of direction this afternoon, we can sort of reprioritize some work. But it's a priority work item on our work plan.
Okay, great. So if you could just go back to the previous slide where we talked about the pros and cons.
Yep. Okay.
The larger, less affordable units as a con. I think I've made it very clear in the past, I support going to the 2, so my answer is going to be yes. I'm not tied to the fact that those parking units are in the individual townhouse. Okay, if the site allows for a separate parking area where they're able to group parking together and keep a controllable size on a townhouse unit or a row home, I'm perfectly open to that. It doesn't have to mean that everything has to be, 8 feet wider. So don't tie the number of units per unit that it has to be in the unit itself. Okay? We saw a development recently that had, parking off-site, essentially. I'm certainly open to that. Okay? That's all I have for right now on this point.
Councillor Hodge?
Okay, same thing. I support the going to 2. I was going to make the same comment, though I don't necessarily, if the lot configuration doesn't work, I don't want to see 2 less units because they couldn't make the garage wider. Putting the extra 2 lots somewhere at the end of the project as overflow residence parking works for me. At least the parking is on site and not out in the road or in some residential neighborhood. So 2 spots, but I'm not tied to having that in the spot.
Welfare.
You said that it may become problems with infill. I'm presuming that's in the area of where we may want to do a triplex or a fourplex or something like that.
That's right.
Okay. The other thing is that they could, if this was passed, a developer could come forward and ask for a variance, either because we're right next to a SkyTrain or whatever. So this sets the standard, but it doesn't mean that on a one-off or an individual basis, if they could make a case to drop below that, they could, in terms of just like we do now in the TDS, where they come forward. So that still is an option.
That's correct.
Okay, then I support the 2.
Thank you. Councillor Reid?
I support the 2 for the exact same reason that Councillor Marsden mentioned. There are designs, and I see one of our primo realtors here in the audience. And there are some really nice designs, and Brian, I know, has sold a lot of those units that don't necessarily have a double garage. There are other ways of providing 2 units without having them attached as a double garage, and not in tandem. That's a big thing for me. I don't count tandem. And to me, where you go resident parking requirements be increased from 1.5 to 2, I agree with that. But in a slide before that, you were talking about, I guess maybe I'm going to the next one, but about the visitor parking and that. Yep. If there were 2 spaces for everyone, then I agree the visitor parking can stay where it is. Yep. If there aren't 2 spots, then we have to change it. And to those representatives of UDI who are here and who've worked on it, let me tell you, when we first went up to Burke Mountain specifically and started working on that problem, we would have a long street, and developers would come in, 4 of them on that street, and they'd count all their parking spots and then say there's these many spots on street. And we had 4 developers counting the same spots on the same street. It doesn't work that way. And now we're into a situation in some of the neighborhoods up there that it's just wrong. It's just wrong. So we have to figure out a way. I would like to say I want to work with you, not against you, but to have the neighborhood that we want, we have to provide a certain amount of parking on site. So that's where I am. Thank you.
So, Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. I guess I'm just trying to get my head around your recommendations, and I really want to know. I think on this one I get where you're coming from, but on other ones, if there are recommendations that you're making because of what you've heard from council, but don't necessarily go against proper urban design or what we think is going to happen in the future, I'd like to know, because we've given you lots of suggestions over the years based on our impressions, our ideas, feedback that we've heard. We're not always right, and I want to make sure that we make the right decisions. We don't know what the future of autonomous ride sharing is going to be, for example, right? And so there might be areas of our city where we need less parking than we're I don't want all this stranded space. So if there are recommendations where, you're doing it because of council suggestions, I'd just like to know, that's all.
You'd like to answer, respond?
Yeah.
$180,000.
I think there's consensus amongst the staff working on this issue that there should be 2 parking spaces per unit for all these townhouse type of units. But then the 64, or the elephant in the room is how are those 2 parking spaces provided? As we go down into, and maybe we can sort of go back and forth into some subsequent slides. The presentation speaks of tandem parking, and that there is a sort of piece for discussion purposes about maybe, right now an applicant can deliver 100% of their units in tandem parking. There's no restrictions saying that you couldn't do 100% of the parking in tandem. It may be difficult to provide all the parking given what we've heard. But if we were to go to the 2 parking spaces per unit, would council consider perhaps counting some tandem as 2 spaces versus our current practice as counting as 1? Because we were mindful of a developer can provide parking sort of in pockets on a site, but there likely be implications for the amount of green space, the amount of sort of hard surface and those sort of things, and those are the sort of things that we tried to balance in our recommendations to council. I can, if should council desire, maybe we can flip that forward to the tandem parking, and Jim might have some.
Excuse me. Yeah, no, I should stay on here. Okay. You can mention if you'd like, but I want to stay on this slide by slide. Thank you. Move off the slide.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. That would be my suggestion as well. But to come back to Councillor Wilson's question, we've received input certainly from council on this. As mentioned, George has had, staff have had discussions with a informal subcommittee from UDI, so we got a sense of their concerns and comments. We've worked with other staff. There's expertise in our transportation section engineering that we've drawn on. There was a municipal scan that George has talked about. We want to make sure we're consistent with others. And we've also kicked around a lot of different ideas. What about this? What about that? And we've gone and done some testing. That's one of the reasons it's taken a little while to get back to looking at how this parking would work on these lots, standard-sized lots. And so at the end of the day, what we've done is we've weighed between those various pieces of information and input, and we're setting out what we feel are valid, supportable recommendations for right now in Coquitlam in these residential areas. So we're making that recommendation for council to consider.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Wilson?
Well, just a quick question on if we provide parking, in this particular case, somewhere on site. My concern is how do you police that? How do you make sure that, if every unit is supposed to have 2 spots and I show up late, get home from work and there's no of the outdoor spots, for example.
They're signed. By staff. They're signed by staff.
So that would be my hope then. Okay.
Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you very much. It shouldn't be any surprise. I'm going to support yes for 2. And I've talked about this for a while now about just not Northeast Coquitlam's one area, but I think throughout the whole city we're finding parking problems as we densify. We're putting more townhousing into areas, and the parking problems we're having within areas. The other issue is affordability. Detached homes are no longer affordable for families that used to start off in townhouses when their kids were older, may become teenagers, getting cars for moving into detached housing where there would be more parking. We're going to have a lot more teenagers and people living in townhousings throughout their growing up and wanting cars or being in there. So we need to adapt to that and realize that trend is there and now. There's also there's going to be a loss in yield whether the parking is 2 units right to it or placed somewhere else because you're taking you're needing more space for parking. So there will be an effect on the yield. But I look at most other cities that have 2 right now are working. And I think, as Mayor Stewart said over the years, that usually comes off the sale price and it's an effect. So I don't know it's actually going to make the units that much less, unaffordable. I think there will be adjustment. With other cities been doing it. They've been buying up. They've been working. It's worked elsewhere. We've seen that having 1 unit in areas in Northeast Coquitlam and other areas isn't working for the community. And I think that's our role here, is to make sure what works for the community. Developers come in with great projects, but they come in and they leave. We're responsible for what the community has here for the long term and the effect it has on them. So I think going to 2 units for ground oriented, and I think we can be flexible in the 2 ways, but we will have an effect on the yield. But I do think it's going to provide a better community, better parking for people. And I think, as Councillor Hodge said, if we have a proposal that needs a variance, we can look at that, make that decision at that time, and work at that. But I think that's what we do in a lot of situations, depending where it's located, what's it located by, if there's a bus or transit route or whatever, you can maybe make those certain adjustments in those areas, or if there's some odd areas. But I think this is something I know Councillor Reid and I've been pushing for this request to go to 2 for a number of years now. So I'm definitely in support of this, and I do not think the cons are that big. It's being done in other cities on a regular basis, and I think it would just make our area more livable for our residents moving into those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. I've got some concern associated with the costs. I think we need to go to 2, but I would only support going to 2 if we allow some of them to be tandem. I'm not particularly comfortable with 50%, maybe 33%, but I contemplate right now that our real challenge is that single family is no longer affordable, and therefore townhouse is family housing. But townhouse has also traditionally been housing for single parents, families, and so if you've got 3 young children and mom or dad, they may not be contemplating the need for a 2-car garage, and so a tandem allows them the expandability if life changes, but it doesn't preclude the 14 or 16 or 18-foot wide townhouse. That's our challenge, is that, of course, a townhouse is 14 to 18 feet wide unless you require 2 cars of parking, non-tandem, in which case it's 24 feet wide, 20 plus a door, a man door, although there are some designs that put the man door somewhere else. So I look at, say, Black and White, which I thought was a successful project. It's and there's some apron solutions at Black and White as well that help contribute to expanded parking, but that's obviously tandem. In the end, I'm comfortable going to 100% 2-car garage doors, but I don't have a problem with 100% 2-car if we do allow tandem.
So, Mr. Mayor,
tandem and/or outside as a solution, yeah.
So your vote on this one is conditional on the vote on the next one, but the vote on the next one takes place after the vote on this one, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So how do we...
Well, the 2 are so interrelated. There's a whole bunch of folks out there that say this is a massive hit to the affordable viability of some of these projects by requiring all the units to be 24 feet wide. And I can't. That precludes some really, really popular designs that are really well accepted in the market, and they've been thriving in Coquitlam, and we need to find more and more projects like that, and we're about to go in the opposite direction if we don't.
Okay, thank you.
Careful.
No, I haven't spoken. Does anybody else want to speak for the first time? I haven't spoken yet, and it should come as no surprise that I was was the one voice on council for the last couple of years who's not been calling for this, who's really been concerned about the impact on families, on people starting out, wanting to find the sort of housing option that they can afford. We have one big issue in Coquitlam and the Metro Vancouver, and it's affordability. And if this has even somewhat of a negative impact on affordability, it's throwing gasoline on the affordability fire. And I don't want to risk that. So I think the lack of parking, and eventually those streets are going to be filled up. People's single space or tandem space is filled up, or parking on their apron. They've got to make decisions. What is most important is to get them into the house into the first place. And I want to do everything I can to get them into that home, not to put up more barriers to keep them out of the home. And I've been pretty clear on that for years, so no surprise that I'll be voting against this. Anybody else want to speak for the first time? Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I want to thank you for meeting with UDI. I think I've been pushing for lots of off-street parking as well. However, reading that it could add 70 to 180,000 to the price of a unit, that just, I couldn't believe that, and I don't want to reverse anything we've done with our housing affordability strategy in promoting more big homes and fewer compact housing, our housing choices. If this was strictly, we're talking about just town housing, I might be more inclined to go with a combination of 2 cars and some tandem. But if this is going to affect our housing choices and the infill of the compact housing, I don't want it to affect that. I don't want the 8,000 square foot house on the 13,000 foot lot because of something like this, the unintended consequences. So I'm now struggling with the housing affordability too. We're promoting housing affordability, and adding 180,000 to the price of a townhouse was super eye-opening for me.
Thank you. Councillor Zarrillo.
Well, when I was reading through this, it crossed my mind that affordability is actually not a reality anymore. I mean, people that are making 6-figure salaries, where both people in the household are making 6-figure salaries, are still not in a position to be able to take on mortgages of $600,000, $700,000, and $800,000 with the price of daycare, with the price of gasoline, with the price of all of this stuff. So I lend myself to where Councillor Reid was, that we need to make, our responsibility is to make livable communities. So the notes that I made is that affordability has left us, not that we shouldn't focus on it, but we need to do something with livability. So then it comes to the idea is, why does everything have to be so black and white? Why does it have to be that everything has to be 2 or yes or no on the 2? We've talked so much about the radius from SkyTrain locations. So why wouldn't we have disclaimers? Mayor Stewart talked about it, disclaimers on certain situations, but most certainly disclaimers around the SkyTrain. And I think specifically about Reqs, where we went out and found out that townhouses are highly in demand in the Reqs area. And I'm afraid that if we do this in the Reqs area, we're going to lose that developers' openness to do townhouses in an area where people are really, really pulling for townhouses. So I'm halfway between both. I do think we need to do the 2 in the far out areas where we're having all the trouble, but I really think there's a happy medium here, and so it gets us into that.
I think we got a clarification on it.
Just to
TDS still doesn't apply.
Yeah, the TDS areas, sort of our more sort of intense urban areas, are outside the scope of this study, because staff agree that the TDS areas are just TOD areas were looked at just recently. So in those areas, we're not recommending any changes to what council has previously sort of given us direction on.
Okay, so we're still. This is also includes all along Austin. Then this would go on Austin too, no?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, yeah, outside of the areas close to get to the TDS areas. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no TDS area in Austin.
Okay. So anyway, I think I'm totally comfortable with 2 in a lot of situations, but I don't think we can. I think to write a bylaw that's flatly it's 2 everywhere is. Perfect example is everything is customized now. Everything. People want gluten-free this and that and the other thing. I don't think we should be simplifying bylaws. I don't think it works that way, unfortunately. We're getting more complicated, not less.
Okay, it's the final speaker. I'll ask for the show of hands now on question 1. Can you put the slide up there?
At a point of order, just a question.
Okay, go ahead.
The mayor, when he spoke, introduced the discussion on tandem. I thought tandem was a separate question, but now looking at the presentation, there is some discussion of tandem before question 2. So is the tandem discussion entirely going to be discussed then?
Well, that's,
So can
that's
we-
the prelim to 2.
That's the prelim to that. Okay, so that falls into a whole. So we're voting on 2, the whole way of how we split it and whether we allow some of tandem. That is part of that second question then.
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
yeah, that's the second
Okay.
question.
Just to get the
Yes.
point of order,
Sure.
I think we need 2 spaces if they're tandem, like Mr. Stewart was saying. So if I'll vote yes, but if we lose on the tandem, then I
Yeah,
would
we can,
vote
you know
no.
what, this is a committee, we can go back.
We can go back.
Go back and do a vote, I guess.
Well,
Can we not?
Mr. Chair, there is nothing about the tandem that would be obviated by the answer to this question. So we could do tandem first.
Why are they in this order, Mr. McIntyre?
It doesn't matter. I mean, either we do
Doesn't
this one
matter.
in this order. It doesn't matter.
We've had this discussion. I want to do them in this order. This is the fundamental question, is it not?
So just if I can sort of help council a bit, from a staff point of view, as council has pointed out, you could, an applicant or a development can deliver to 2 parking spaces in a number of different ways. They could be this conventional side-by-side garage. They could be in a tandem garage. They could be the second space on a, heaven forbid, a single-car garage with a driveway space in front, or it could be, the second space could be on surface someplace. So there's a variety of ways that the 2 can be delivered. So that's why we tried to start with the big question first of all. And then, like I say, there's a number of different ways which that 2 can be delivered.
Okay, I think this is the big question. So let's have the show of hands. Question 1 is on the screen. All in favor? Sorry. Are those voting yes? Put their hands up. That's Councillor Marsden, Hodge, Reid, Wilson, Stewart, Towner, and Asmussen. No. Councillors O'Neill and Cirillo. So got your feedback there. So, next issue, Mr.
Okay,
Clerk.
let's just make sure I get my notes correct. So the next issue is one which, since I've been here in Coquitlam, have heard a lot of the discussion about, is how the supply of, if we go down the, if we were, council's given us direction, yes, there should be 2 per unit. So the next question is, how could those two be delivered? So, the item here, the required number of resident parking spaces is typically provided in either side-by-side, the 2-car side-by-side garages, tandem, or some combination thereof. So we've tried to illustrate sort of graphically the 2 extremes, which is 100% side-by-side and 100% tandem. Now, in practice, most developments do provide some proportion, it's at 30, 40, 50, 60% of one way or the other. So the thinking here is conceptually is that, is there a sweet spot where there's maybe perhaps some combination of side-by-side, tandem, plus some surface spaces, which might be the best way, or one ways to sort of deliver the 2 spaces per unit, which council is deliberating on. So if we flip to the sort of the pros and cons of tandem parking now. Some of the advantage of tandem parking, as we've heard some discussion, is it does provide for some of the smaller, more affordable units just by virtue of the module size, as they're narrow units. Through the municipal scan, we've come to learn that most jurisdictions do allow some proportion of tandem parking within their parking bylaws and the zoning bylaws. It could sort of support some of the the infill application, 3 and 4 plexes in our housing choices areas. So there's with your lot size is more constrained there, and it does add to sort of variety of housing types and consumer choices. So say a project, we'll call it XYZ project, if there's a range of units that as a potential purchaser has to choose from, it's right. It's not just black or white. So there's a range of units, and the developers like that too, because the potential market is larger as well. But clearly, there's some downsides to providing parking in tandem. What we've learned is that it does, or it could increase the demand for on-street parking, because typically, or on occasion, because of the inconvenience with that obstructed second space, people don't utilize that second space for the parking, and some of that demand for the parking ends up on the city street, so could be problematic. Second space, we've learned it could be used for storage, but alternatively, I've seen storage in two-car side-by-side garages as well. So, I guess from a council perspective, we're being honest, it is kind of inconsistent with some of the messages and feedback that staff have heard on previous applications regarding tandem parking. So there are pros and cons of delivering parking in tandem. So then the $64 question is, recognizing the pros and cons of tandem parking, or the statement, an option may be to place a cap on the proportion of tandem parking allowed in ground-oriented multifamily developments. And again, pros and cons. Precedent, some other municipalities do allow for the mix. It provides for the mix of housing types and choices within a single project. Different price points, so more. We got the affordable and maybe not so affordable units within a single project. And the development industry is supportive of this approach of placing a cap on whatever that number might be on the proportion of tandem in a project. Downsides, again, there is inconvenience, or there could be inconvenience with the obstructed second space in these tandem units. Increased demand for, again, on-street parking, and the second space may not be used for parking. So again, the pros and cons with even this sort of, shall we call it the hybrid option. So the question becomes, should there be a cap on the proportion of tandem parking allowed in ground-oriented multifamily developments? Yes or no? And from staff's perspective, we believe that there should be a cap on the tandem parking, because it balances. We tried to balance the pros and cons of that approach, and in the absence of council conversation discussion, is right now we're suggesting that a maximum of 50% of the garages can be provided as tandem, and opening it up for discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to have a point of clarification here. So this question absolutely depends on how you define tandem parking right now, or how you count tandem parking. Because right now the city counts tandem parking as only one space. You can build tandem parking. We're just going to count it as one space. So don't we have to decide three first? How do you want to define tandem parking as one or two spaces?
We've included
and then don't we have to do number two?
So we've included a definition within the report, and I'll quote the definition if you bear with me for 1 minute here. So on page 2 of the report, the first paragraph, we say, tandem parking is the placement of one parking space behind another parking space, such that only one parking space has unobstructed access to a drive aisle, driveway, or street. So it could be a combination. You could have a enclosed garage with the two enclosed park spaces, one back. You could have a single car garage with the second tandem stall on a driveway on the outside. So those are sort of typically the way they've been delivered in the marketplace here.
Right.
But in terms of order, I think you're right. Question 3 defines it better, and I think people will know how to vote easier if they know the answer to question 3. So I would flip the order of those two questions. So I would take question 3 first and then go to question 2.
So, So, there's not much.
Okay, so let me...
Thank you very much, City Manager. Appreciate that, because I think that is crucial. So let's go to question 3.
Question 3, okay. Okay, so here, that's the background, and I think we've gone through a lot of this. So currently, counted parking is counted as one space, while side-by-side are two, and I've outlined the pros and cons, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but because I think we've kind of gone through this already. But then the question becomes, if a cap on tandem were implemented, should tandem parking continue to be counted as one space? Yes or no?
Okay, good. So let's, we can talk about this first, or questions, or have the vote on this?
Just a quick question, if I might.
Okay. Go ahead.
When you speak tandem, are you envisioning enclosed tandem, or a single enclosed with a driveway let down as the tandem piece? Were you differentiating between those two?
Either.
It's either.
It's either.
Yeah, it's either.
You have to move both cars to get them back.
Well, because right now, tandem space on an apron, when it's provided for secondary suite, is counted as a second. So it's not counted as one there. So that's a good
However,
question.
in a lot of the townhomes we've seen, there's a double enclosed. And in some of them, the letdown is large enough. Because that counts as only one still?
That's never been counted, that letdown.
Currently, that's counted as one, correct?
No.
So is this question mainly then for the townhouses?
Because that's
we're not talking secondary suites
No,
with this.
that's a separate question.
We're still
Yeah, so this relates to the townhouses.
So it is one space only, and that's how we count them now. Okay.
Okay, so we're not differentiating between enclosed or not enclosed. We're saying if there was a single enclosed and a driveway letdown, that's tandem.
Counts as two.
That's right. But the thinking when we're doing this is more predominantly because even the situations where it's very rare now which developers provide that small single-car garage, right?
Exactly.
And because most of the projects we see have the parking which is provided in tandem is enclosed. There's a few ones, but for the most part, the units, the tandem is, in practical purposes, they're being delivered enclosed.
Okay.
And some, in fact, have the 1, 2, plus the third, I guess.
The driveway letdown.
The driveway letdown as well, so it provides for 3 parking opportunities. But
Exactly.
right now, tandem is only counted as 1.
Okay.
Right now.
So if we go to this, then theoretically, a builder could construct with a single enclosed carport, a driveway apron, and that is tandem, which would open up the piece behind the garage for additional square footage in the house to be built, as opposed to what they're currently doing, which is a double depth.
Yeah.
Provided
Provided the driveway depth in front of the unit.
Provided the driveway
deep
depth
enough
is
to allow for that.
Okay.
All right. Has there been a townhouse development where we've ever counted the space on the apron as a parking space?
Some of the first ones we did.
Some of the first ones.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Asmundson.
Oh, have you got me done?
Not yet.
I was down for the last question, I
Okay,
guess.
this is a new speaking order here. I'm sorry. Asmundson, Stewart, Reed, Hodge.
Well, this is the difficult one because pretty much consistently in council on this for most of the developments, we've said no to counting tandem. I mean, council's been saying quite long that no, we're not going to count that tandem. We had a bunch of applications come in that they've said, the bylaw says that tandem counts, and council has said, well, no, we don't agree because we don't think they work. I think, once again, we had the Riley Park discussion, and I mentioned about needing parking in the parking lot because the people in the Riley townhouse, when we talked about the whole issue about moving the community center and all that and developing that into townhouses, they came out and said, we got nowhere to park. Because what do they have in the Riley? They have a lot of tandems. And the people that have tandems aren't using them, and they're parking on the street, which is creating a lot of problems in the area of parking. So it gets back to the question. I mean, council, for the longest time, has been consistent in a lot of applications coming forward, not counting tandem as a parking stall. So I'm going to say, no, we shouldn't be, because that's consistently how we've been dealing with applications in the last year and a half to 2 years.
You'll be answering yes, I think. Should parking spaces be counted as one space? Yes.
A weird question.
Well,
it has been counted as one space.
You want to continue counting it as one space.
Continue.
Well, I don't want to, but we don't. But the fact is, as council,
The two spaces as one space.
Yeah, so it's one space, yeah, the two spaces is one.
So the answer is
Okay, the
yes.
question, okay, yes, because the question is a little.
Yeah, it's the way the question's worded.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tricky question.
Perfectly modified now?
Yeah, that made my point.
Okay. Mayor Stewart, then Reed, Hodge, Wilson.
So it's probably true as we move forward in this new climate that we will change our minds about some things. We will have been right before, and we will change our minds, and we will still be right because the environment has changed, the context has changed, and so I'm challenged right now by how do we deal with this? I have traditionally said that tandem doesn't work in a townhouse, and now we're fine with it being one. So that only counts as one, and because our parking standard is 1.5. If we make our parking standard 2, then I have to say one of the other tandem parking can count. Primarily because we have no more options. We have to be able to allow some of the units to be 14 feet wide and 15 and 16 and 17 and 18. So I will say no, they should not be continued, and I'm not sure what the first half of the question is for, because either way, once a parking space is more than 28 feet long, I'm now thinking it should count as 2, whether or not we put a cap on tandem. So, for example, for that matter, there's going to be some people that choose a 9-foot car, the smart car, and they can fit 2 of them in an 18-foot deep space. Now, is that, so there are other solutions to this that some households will have to embark on because they ended up with their budget being so constrained by the housing market as it has changed so strongly. So I'm going to say, no, it shouldn't, and I don't even like the first half of the question because it doesn't make sense.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Councillor Reid?
Well, I'm with Councillor Asmundson on the yes, but, and however, and except for, and all that stuff.
Nevertheless, whereas.
I'm looking at the existing parking standards, and it says townhouses, 1 space per 1-bedroom unit and 1.5 for 2. Well, I think there should be 2 spaces for a 2-bedroom unit, and then 0.2 visitor spaces per unit. So I'm quite happy to raise the townhouse one to 2 spaces per unit, not tandem, and then leave the visitor space alone. But I have to say, on all of these housing types, it also depends on the size of the units. If you're going to build me little 1-bedroom, 700 square foot units, 1 parking spot is enough. If you're going to build me what I need people to build me right now, which is 1,400 square foot and up, because I'm going to have babies, well, God help me if I do anymore, but when I was going to have a little family. Yes, along with a lot of other things.
Point of order, although that was very creative.
Yes. Oh, don't make them creative. Yeah. So
Not creative.
when we're looking at family spaces, then I do need those 2 spaces. And so I don't think you can break this down just into a housing type, but I think size of unit comes into play here. And the other thing that comes into play when I've been out showing units in the last little while is the amount of our SUVs and trucks. And let me tell you, it is not easy to find a townhouse these days with a garage big enough for an SUV or a truck. And that's what a lot of the young families have today. So we've got a lot of thinking around this. It just isn't something you can say, oh, well, all of these shall have this. You really have to, I think, break it down a bit. So I would say, yes, I think a tandem should be counted as 1 space. It absolutely should be. And so if you're going to put in an 800 square foot or 700 square foot townhouse, then that's plenty with the visitor spaces as they are today. But if it's a 1,600 square foot unit, it's not enough. It's not enough for a family. So there's another wrinkle I'll throw in. It's size dependent.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Okay, so this is really a definition about tandem. now we're going back to the first question here. And I'll just go back to the first question, and the answer to the question is you can still apply for a variance. So rather than changing the definition here, which changes it basically the intent of the last question, what you can do is, as Councillor Reid said, if you're building a small little studio type apartment, then you come to council and say, look, these are never going to house more than 2 people. They're never going to need this. They can apply for that variance away from the 2, and that's always open. So I'm not going to start factoring the size of units and everything else into this. The question is and I'm not going to factor in size of cars. It doesn't matter how big the car is and whether you can park 2 in the driveway. If you have to get up at 3 in the morning to move the car because the other person works shifts or something, it's 1 parking spot because the second person is going to park out on the road in front of somebody else's house. And that's really what this is all about, is trying to make sure that people park within their complex. Yes, parking adds to the price of the house. We could make all the properties cheaper right across the city if we said go park in front of somebody else's house because we're making yours. That's not what we're trying to do here. So, I keep going back in my mind thinking about, has it worked? And I keep going back to the Riley experience, the Riley Park development. And the people that came out and talked about that development across the street and how bad the parking is in their neighborhood. I went through that Riley development. I had another councillor with me, and while we were there talking to people, we looked at a couple of garage doors. There are 2 tandem spots. The back part was filled with stuff, and we talked to one resident who said, well, I was able to buy an extra spot for my strata, and it's across the the walkway or across the complex from where I am. But clearly tandem parking did not work in that development, particularly enclosed. So if we're going to say that tandem spots count as 2 spots, we're right back to square one, and we might as well not have suggested in the last vote that we're going to increase parking to 2, because experience shows it doesn't matter how big the driveway is or how big the cars are. If you have to park behind another car, you're going to park on the road instead of having to move that car. So I'm voting yes. This is a definition. The part about how much we allow, while we allow a few, maybe, that's the second part. I'm willing to go put some leeway into that. But from a definition, if you have to move your car to get out, it might as well be 1 spot.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
I like the way Mayor Stewart put it. Sometimes we change our minds, and sometimes the environment changes. And I have changed my thinking about this based on affordability, based on public transit, and based on what people project is going to happen in the future. And I mentioned earlier, autonomous ride-sharing cars. Well, there's people that feel like they're going to be 10 years and they're going to be all over the place. Well, how does that impact on our parking needs, right? So I think people need to get used to more congestion, for lack of a better word. I think people need to get used to having a harder time to find parking, and we need to do everything we can to keep the prices as affordable as we can. So I've changed my mind on this one. But my question is, Councillor Reid brought up an excellent point, right? Depending on the size of the place, and then Councillor Hodge said, well, apply for variance. I understand both views, but I'm just wondering if we went with, okay, you can apply for a variance to account for 1 spot for a smaller unit. How difficult is that on our planning department? How difficult is that when it comes to a development variance, DVP, all that stuff? Like I don't understand what the unintended consequences of that kind of decision might be.
Well, we would do, working together with our transportation colleagues, do a thorough analysis of the implications, and most likely we would ask the applicant to get the services of a parking consultant to sort of help them justify the variance.
And it's still open to whatever council feels on that day, right?
If you want to make an allowance for the size of the unit, you should visit it now.
Exactly.
And have it as that first question. You should say 2 for most, but very small units, and you have to pick that cutoff. It's 1 or 1.5. You should do it now, not variance every time, because that just adds bureaucracy. It adds stupid rules to the whole process.
Well, and we're not consistent, right?
Right.
And so that's not fair to the people who are building these developments. So, okay, so if we were to want to do what Councillor Reid suggests, is that something we can add on at the end of this?
Yes, we could. We could revisit that first question and define it a little bit more precisely.
I would allow that.
I'm sure you
Thank you. If the chair would allow it.
Thank you. Is that it, Councillor
Yes,
Wilson?
thank you.
Thank you. I know that a few people want to speak twice, but there's still some people who haven't spoken. Councillor Zerillo.
So I like that idea that Councillor Reid, like we need to be in the gray area here. I'm just looking for the numbers. Like, I'm looking for the stats, the facts. Like, we have Riley, we have Black and White. Like, did we go out? Did we ask how people are living? Did we find, we got all the input from UDI, but did we really find out how are people living in these things and what's not working? Like, I don't know if I'm missing that information, but someone's told me in the past, we've had at this table before ICBC info around how many cars per household up on Brook Mountain. Like, if we can isolate postal codes or street numbers and find out how many cars are registered, we would have some information to make an informed decision about. So I totally think we need to be in the gray area here. But if we don't get the actual data about how people are living, and it's still an arbitrary number, and it's just our opinion. So that's my comments. I'd love to see the stats of what's really happening in Riley. Mayor Stewart said Black and White's working. What is it? How are they living? Let's get the real info.
Councillor Towner.
I agree with everything that's just been said. As far as I know, in the future with townhouse developments, we may have zip cars or share cars. So then the people buying the units don't have that extra car. We don't know. I don't see. I would love more data too. I don't see the issue if it's the same family. I understand the issue with tandem when you have a tenant. To me, when my husband pulls in behind me and I got to go and get the keys, move his car, and get back in my car and I'm gone, it just adds a minute to my commute. So I don't really understand the whole issue of tandem as that big of a deal when it's the same family. You just throw your keys inside the door. That said, could it depend on location? Building a brand new, more luxurious townhouses up in a certain neighborhood, 2 cars, no tandem. But if we're trying to build more affordable units in another area of town, maybe carports. I mean, the Riley thing to me stuck out. The people were using their garages for storage. They weren't parking on the street because of a tandem issue. It was because they weren't using their garage. So if we build some townhouses with carports, so they can't fill it up with stuff and they have to park there. I just think, again, this isn't black and white. It's completely gray, and it depends. Just like the RV discussion last week. Some can have RVs if it's an estate lot and some can't. It depends. I just don't want to wipe out any progress that we've made as a council addressing housing affordability with some black and white bylaw.
Thank you. And I haven't spoken yet, before everybody goes to the second round, because there's 3 so far that want to speak again. I just have a question about, you did mention that certainly even now, according to the vote we had on question 1, even a 1-bedroom ground-oriented townhouse would need 2 spaces. But are there actually 1-bedroom townhouses or any 1-bedroom ground-oriented made anywhere? Does anybody build a 1-bedroom ground-oriented? I just can't see that happening.
Yeah, it's got 3
One
dens.
again.
And I've been advised that in some of our TOD areas, there may be, the occasional 1-bedroom garden suite or something, but generally speaking, I'm not aware of sort of, more of a quote-unquote larger townhouse project where there's 1-bedroom units being provided. That's more in the, the apartment condominium type of status. So
those aren't defined as ground-oriented.
No.
Right. So that's the question I had. I'm going to vote no on this one because of number one's vote result, and then we'll have to figure out where the scale gets placed on the number two question. But because of number one's vote result, I'm definitely voting no on this one. That we should count as two. If we're going to increase the demand to have 2 spaces per unit, then we count tandem as 2 spaces. That's what I believe. So I'll vote no on that.
You count tandem as 2 spaces?
I will count tandem as 2 because we're now, as of number one vote, we're going to demand that everybody has 2 spaces. So if we're going to demand that everybody has 2 spaces, I'm going to say, well, okay, that can be met by having tandem. I think it's consistent with my positions. So I'll be voting no, which will have the effect of changing our policy. So second time around, we have Marsden, Reed, and Hodge.
Just very quickly, Councillor Reed spoke about looking at the size of the townhouse, and obviously when it comes to parking, one could say that size matters, but I don't think on this case it's a really slippery slope. We're not seeing a lot of one-bedroom townhouse. If we start to go to, say, a one-bedroom townhouse only needs 1 stall, I could suggest that we would start to see proposals brought forward for stacking one-bedroom townhomes. And that's not what we want to see. If we're looking for family-sized housing, we've got to be very careful that the rule you put in place doesn't counteract what you're trying to see. If we're trying to see, and in one breath we'll say we want larger townhomes that are going to enable a family to grow up, be very careful that your parking regulations don't deter that from happening. So I'd be very, very cautious about that. So I will say, given what we've done on the first question as well, that I'm going to be saying no on this one as well, and we should change the way we count with our requirement.
Yes.
As far as Riley is concerned,
Yes.
No, you just
should tandem continue to be counted as a single? And I'm saying no.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, you're caught in the way the question's written, right, Jim?
Exactly. Again, I'm doing the same thing that the mayor has said here. Okay?
No.
So my point is, and we use Riley as the example well, and I think that makes good sense because it was quite vocal. What I'll remind everybody is what we heard about is people were utilizing or parking the street and scrambling to find around. That tandem spot was only counted as 1 previously, so they had 2 vehicles. And they were using that tandem unit, now in hindsight, exactly how it was intended. 1 might get used for storage and 1 for a car. It only got counted as 1 car spot, but we only required 1 car spot.
That's right.
That was the issue. So I think here we can revisit it. We'll address part of the tandem with the cap, I think, but I'm going to say no on this one.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Councillor Reed.
Okay, so if yesterday we built a townhouse and there was a car inside in a single garage and an apron outside, that townhouse would have been called as 1 spot. So it would have been included. So I think this is worded in a typical planning ease. The reason I brought up the size of housing is because we have housing choices, and someone mentioned here that we have to watch what we do with housing choices. So I'm suggesting that in some of the housing choices, and I look at a few that are done in Millardville, some of them were small units, 850 square feet, along with a couple of larger units, 4 on a lot. And those smaller units were probably 1 bedroom and a den, or just 1 bedroom. And as far as I'm concerned, they don't need 2 spots because they're small enough that they could work with 1. That's why I'm suggesting it. Now, I think it can be made very clear by planning that something that is 1 bedroom and a den or below a certain amount can, like you say, let's get some certainty here because developers need certainty before they go ahead and do what they're doing. So that is why it's mainly for the housing choices. You don't see too many small townhouses, although we have built a few, but we will see them in housing choices, and that just allows that affordability aspect to keep going. And the other thing, remember, every time we allow a 2-car family in a 1 parking spot unit, no matter if it's inside or outside, then the rest of the citizens are paying for parking their other car on the street. And we are subsidizing parking in all the developments. And that's not what the streets are for. They're for visitors, they're for homeowners, but not to use, but not to park there constantly 24 hours a day as their own very select spot at taxpayers' expense.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Hodge.
Thank you. That's sort of what I was saying earlier about if you park, reduces the price of housing, but you end up parking on somebody in front of somebody else's house or on a city street. This one is challenging because tandem. I'm going to support a percentage of tandem in developments, but I still think that every house of a certain size, we maybe talk about size now, should have 2 unencumbered parking spots. Later, when we discuss tandem in single family, I'm going to support tandem because there'll be 2 clear spots. It only encumbers 1. So tandem works when the second and third spot are behind each other. But I really think that every living unit that has 2 people working in it with 2 cars needs to have 2 spots. Otherwise, they end up out in the street, and that's why we have the problems like Riley and all the other ones. So it may have been built with the idea that we're only counting it as 1. We may have been built with the idea that we counted it as 2. But bottom line is there's 2 spots there. Only 1 is getting used, and the other car is out on the street and is crowding out the residents that live out in the outlying area. So this is, to me, is just about a definition, and tandem is, I think you count it as 1 spot if you can't move. But I think there's places where you can allow extra spots. And the one part of this, and the reason I wanted to speak the second time is I didn't speak earlier on this, is how it applies in housing choices. Because I fully get when we're into infill, if not having that extra spot or that tandem spot means the project is killed, then I think you have to look at it. But again, most of these projects we're seeing right now, because they have lane entries and they're rear loaded, you've got room to put 2 and 3 cars across the back of the property. And if one of them is in the garage and the other is on the apron, as long as there's one side next to it, then yeah, there's still 2 spots, and the third one may be encumbered. But that's what I said earlier about tandem. I think can be allowed if it's between 2 and 3. But I think you still have to say you always have 2 spots that are unencumbered. And I don't know how to work this in. And that's where I'm coming with saying tandem should only be counted as 1, because I'm sort of saying it's when you have only 2 spots. But when you have 3, I'm willing to look at that tandem being the third and counting it as an individual spot.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, I think, Craig, just right now, I think if you count tandem as 1 space, that means that if you're having 2 spaces, you're having a garage and a tandem space in line, and that counts as 2. So we're not getting away from the Riley situation at all. So, and I think for Dennis, I think the answer is just saying, I'm going to say no, because we can come back to the cap issue later, but if you allow the counting of 1...
You're going to say yes.
Yes to counting it as 1.
No, if you count it as 1, that means you're the 2 spaces. You have 1 is in and 1's a tandem. That means 2 spaces. Because you're counting at 1, you have 1 spot, then 1 tandem. That would be how I read it. And if that's...
Can we have clarification?
I just want clarification.
From Mr. McIntyre, please.
Okay.
So I want to understand this. So if we will say yes, that's counted as 1 space. In a townhouse development, somebody has a garage, they have the tandem space on an apron without space, that's counted the 2nd space, that counts as 2 spaces?
And again, sorry for the awkward wording here, and just thinking now we should have a sketch to show what's meant. But the intention here, and the way the city's bylaw is written now, if you have a tandem garage, let's start with the garage, okay? It's like some of the townhouse units we've seen of late.
So that's 2 spots inside the garage.
Single wide, double deep.
That's important differentiation.
Under the current bylaw, that counts as 1 spot. If you go out to the driveway is long enough, that doesn't count as a parking spot either, unless you're in single family and you got the garage, and you can count that as tandem parking for your secondary street. So that's a separate removed issue. So the question here is, is that should we then, if it's going to be a tandem in a garage, single wide, double length, should that be count as one parking space as per the current bylaw, count as 2 parking spaces? So the answer, so by saying no, yeah, and it's kind of a reverse negative. Okay. By saying no, you're saying, okay, actually, I don't want to just count as 1.
Okay, it's better clear now, because I just want, there's some confusion on the wording of that.
Yeah.
And so the answer is yes. Yeah.
For you, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to clear that.
I'm glad you got that clear. I would have hated for you to have to go back and you do your vote now. One of the reasons, I want to sum this up and I got a chance to talk a second time again too. One of the reasons that I think everybody should vote no on this one is that then we can refine things on question number 2. So if we vote no, then we can allow, then we say a tandem parking is 2 spots. Then we go to question 2. Well, then how many of those should we allow? How many tandems should we allow then? And then you can deal with it that way. If the yes side wins this vote, there's no real question. There's no real question 2 anymore, because there's no need for us to put a cap on tandem parking, given the vote of number 3 and the vote of number 1. There'll be no need to put a cap on the proportion of tandem parking, because you're not going to be, it'll be counted as 1 when you have to have 2, so nobody's going to put, so you're not going to be building tandem parking essentially. Anyway, everybody's spoken, and let's have the show of hands. So on question 3, all those in favor of yes, put their hands up. And that is Reed and Asmundson. All those in favor of no, hands up. And that is Marsden, Hodge, Wilson, Stewart, Towner, and O'Neill. Okay, so the direction was given that it's definitely no. Yes. Councilor Rose?
I'm not going to vote on any of these because I don't have enough information. Just to make that statement.
Sure, that's it's a committee. You can just have information. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so now back to question 2. Now we've now said that we will count tandem as 2. So this question 2 is a good, valid question. Get our teeth into now. Should there now be a cap on the proportion of tandem parking, which counts as 2, allowed in ground-oriented multifamily development? So we had a speaking order on this before. That was Marsden, Asmundson, Towner, Reed, Stewart, and Hodge. So
thank you. So I will, given that we're going to count them as 2, which I think is the right thing to do, I absolutely agree there should be a cap. My initial thought when I saw 50%, I thought that number was high. I had 2 numbers that bounced in my mind. One was 25 and one was 33. The mayor in his earlier comments said 33. So I will be voting yes, there should be a cap. I'm flexible on the number. I think 50% is too high, though. The example from staff.
Which is not going to get through the day's business, so it's
Okay.
more important business.
Mr. Chair, if you want clarification on that, George can speak. Because in the municipal scan, that's one of the questions we looked at. Is so there's a range of percentages.
So just there's at least one municipality which has the 50% cap on tandem. Others, many don't have any cap on tandem at all. And one other one, I believe that the maximum is along the lines of 30 some odd percent tandem, the balance being 2 cars. So there's a range throughout Metro, because some you could have 100% tandem, and others with the various proportions of allowable number tandem. So we thought 50 was sort of the sweet spot in the middle for discussion purposes.
So this question should there be a cap of 50% on the portion?
I think everybody's going to vote yes. The question is, what is the cap?
Yeah.
And we're suggesting
That's another question.
So as Ben said,
I'm sorry,
give your answer
is there
plus
another
a number of
Yeah,
percent.
yeah.
And then we'll zero in.
Yeah, sorry.
So I'd say yes, and I'm fine with
And then
33.
he said 33. So that's the way we should go around the room.
That's what the
Confirm,
question
yes, and what's your number?
Okay, fine. Okay, Asmundson.
I'll support a cap, but it's definitely, but I think it should be, I would be happier at 20%, but I would go to 25%, I think once again, you start getting up too high in that number. You're counting 2 spots. You're going to create more, as Craig said earlier, push more parking on the street, having more parking onto public streets. And where public streets were used and have been used for visitors to come and visit, you're going to have problems. So my soft would be 25%.
Okay. Now, Reid. Councillor Reid.
Oh, I wasn't prepared to answer it in this way, but I don't think I like any tandem parking. So
You would say a 100% cap or 99% cap?
Zero.
I'm sorry. Zero. Right.
So May is yes and the 0.
Yes, 0%. Thank you. Claire Stewart.
thank you. I think a lot of you too.
Well, we got some other issues to deal with today.
Now, in fairness, just to be clear, this is only a cap on the counting of the second tandem space as a second space. You can build as much tandem as you want.
That's correct, yeah.
So, and I would say I'm comfortable with 33 or 50. So I'll go with 33.
Okay. Councillor Hodge.
Okay, so after passionately arguing against the last one and then voting to allow them, it was because I looked ahead to this question and thought, here's the chance to tweet. So I thought allowing some tandem gives some flexibility where those developments need, but I really still believe, as I said earlier, tandem parking really is going to operate as one, so I don't want a lot of it. But I think that in some cases it may make sense. I think in some cases it will be a consumer decision as do I buy this one? Those ones may actually be cheaper than the ones that have 2. So that may all play out in the marketplace, but I think I want to keep cars within the development where the development is. So therefore I'm going to say yes, there should be a cap, and I'd like it down at about 20-25%.
About 0.
Anybody else want to speak on the issue? Councillor Wilson?
Yes, there should be a cap. As we see now, often people in a double car garage only use one spot anyways. So I'd say 33%.
Okay. And I say no cap. You say you didn't want to
Can we get some data? Can we get some data on what's happening now? Like, is there an opportunity to get data on what percentage? Like, I don't want to pull an arbitrary number and when we actually have people in townhouses with tandem parking.
We have people, yeah.
Mr. McIntyre?
Yes, through the chair. As George described, in canvassing the other municipalities, there's quite a range.
I don't care about other municipalities. I care about our developments that we built that have causing problems.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we don't have that information at hand right now.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. That's fine, Terry.
Okay. Stewart.
And I just want to make it clear, the opening dialogue of this entire item was a criticism, I'll call it a criticism, because a council member said, this should have been a long time ago we got this. And I remember all the way through that, no one on council ever asking for you to also provide us some data on any of the elements. So I don't want to make it sound like, and I don't think Councillor Israel meant that, but I don't want to make it sound like you're not providing us the information that you should have. At this point, I would be more comfortable if we had more data, but I didn't ask for it either, and quite frankly, it took a long time to get this report because you've got other work you're doing, not because you were just biding your time. So that was a caveat related to the lack of specific data on tandem parking usage.
Thank you. So everybody's gone around and said yes or no, except Councillor Towner. Why don't you just, so we don't have to show of hands?
I'm a yes. I'm comfortable with 33.
Okay. So, Councillor.
And I just want to say, it's not a comment on about whether I had asked for data or didn't ask for data in the past. I think these are the perfect conversations to realize things, and that's why I think it's pretty obvious that we shouldn't grab an arbitrary number, that we should get some numbers.
You're going to be not abstaining anyway, not voting anyway. So
yeah, I just don't want I'm talking to Mayor Stewart's point.
Point of clarification. We are just providing the guidance for a bylaw that will come, and the public will have the ability to weigh in.
Guidance today, we will not meet April. So
that's right.
Yeah. So we're just asking for how you want to draft it, and we're doing it in open. We've been criticized. Sometimes we But this one, it's all open. We're having the discussion, and this will come to the public to weigh in at some point.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Reid.
When you come back, I would suggest that you have a few drawings that attach showing what a tandem is and what you're counting as one, and because the way these questions are worded, they are a bit planning-ese. Thank you.
Give your answer.
So that was 7-1 with one abstention, and you took notes on the.
What's your percentage? You're 100%?
You
said
yes.
No, right. So you're yes, but 100%. Because given
I've answered no.
Okay.
Answered no.
There should be no.
That's the same as 100% of them should be allowed.
Yeah.
So it's not a cap.
So we got the direction we need.
Yeah.
I think everybody's spoken. I know what we have to do. And it's in summary, we're going to be bringing back with a 33.
Yeah.
Because 1, 2, 3.
25.
No, there's more 33s and 25s.
You can debate that.
Yes, you can debate it again. But for us, we're coming back with 33.
Okay, we're at question 4 now.
We're done.
Okay, so
What's that?
for
How you doing, George?
visitor parking. So
Yes, there should be some.
Can it be tandem?
currently it's 0.2 per unit for townhouses, our row homes and our 3 and 4 plexes and housing choices. There is no visitor parking requirement within the bylaw. We're recommending that we increase contingent on increasing to 2 spaces per unit.
Yes,
It is done already.
Yeah, maintain. Okay. Should there? Yeah. So maintain the status quo is what we're recommending. 20%, and for row homes and 3 plexes, 3 and 4 plexes, maintain the current
Let's just have a
requirements.
show of hands.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Opposed, no.
Maintaining status quo on.
Essentially, yeah.
Oh, no, that was
So question.
7-1 with one abstention again, but this is committee. So we don't get the votes.
Oh, yeah.
One more.
Secondary suite parking. Should secondary suite parking continue to be permitted in tandem? We all know the issue.
I need to speak to this.
Do we know the background on it? Okay, go ahead, May.
About 10 years ago, we changed this. We had to the bylaw where secondary suite parking had to be not in tandem, if you want to call it, or behind, or sharing the driveway. It had to be totally separate. And I don't know why we would be changing that today. You say typically provided. It hasn't been typically provided for at least 10 years. Or shouldn't have been.
It hasn't in Cirque Mountain.
Well, I'm asking, so.
Very briefly, Mr. Chair, that's correct. Previous for the parking requirement was that the parking space for the secondary suite couldn't be in tandem. It had to be off to the side of the driveway. That was changed about 10 years ago, a little less. And so it allowed for secondary suite parking in tandem, and that's been the situation going forward. And through this process, we've heard concerns and questions around that, so I just wanted to confirm.
It was the reverse. I'm sorry.
We just wanted to confirm the direction on this, and our recommendation is let's carry on with the enabling secondary suite parking in a tandem arrangement.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
You remember it differently.
I dispute that. There was and I believe it was Ranch Park somewhere that they came in and they were putting a secondary suite in. They were advised they needed parking, and it was quite a discussion. And they were told no, and they had to make another parking spot off to the side or on the front lawn or something. I remember that.
Yes, Mayor Stewart on this point.
I remember on the discussion related to front-end loaded RS7, RS8 stuff, where you've got 33 feet, and if we were allowing the parking on the driveway for the secondary suite, then there would have been no issue, but we weren't. I remember in that discussion we were requiring the third parking space, which meant that you couldn't do on a 33-foot lot on RS8 secondary suite front loaded. R7 secondary suite front loaded. I remember that we had the long discussion related to that, If the answer was just make sure the driveway is 20 feet long, then the apron rather is, the driveway is 20 feet long, then so I'm confused as well. And all that said, it's irrelevant. What do we want from this point forward? But I did want to express my confusion on that one. So.
And on that same point, both Councillor Cirillo and I think raised this issue a couple of years ago. I raised it when I encountered a show home, a prize home, on Burke Mountain that said it had a legal secondary suite in there, and I said, well, how can this suite be legal? There's no parking pad. And I was told, oh no, it is legal. It's in tandem in front of the driveway. And I said, really? So this is actually the one that I am concerned about. So
moving forward.
Yeah. So let's move forward, and really just regardless of what the status is now, and maybe there's some gray in our laws here. Maybe the question: should we allow secondary street parking be permitted to be in tandem? Let's just forget whether or not it's continued to be, and go to that question.
Weird again.
Okay. Should secondary suite parking be permitted in tandem?
That's the question.
I vote no.
And so, do we need more discussion on this?
Yes.
Okay. So we have Marsden, Asmussen, Towner, and Hodge.
I do not believe there is a greater impact on street parking than secondary suites counting it in tandem. Because the reality is, if you have a basement suite and you are not going to have your tenant park behind you.
That's right.
Because you want to get out in the morning to go to work, you're not going to be knocking on your tenant's suite door who happens to work a graveyard shift or whatever, say, hey, you got to move your car. That's just not human nature. It's one thing to roll over and say to your spouse, hey, move your car, I'm going to work. I grew up in Coquitlam on a 12,000 square foot lot, and we did have a single driveway on the side that had tandem parking. And yes, you did as Councillor Towner said. You grabbed the keys of somebody else's vehicle and you moved it so you could get your car out. That's reality. You don't have that option with your tenant. And so expecting to utilize a tandem parking, they're not doing it. They're on the street, and that's why they're as crowded as they are right now. So we need to find a way to get these spots off to the side in some way, shape, or form so vehicles can access.
Is there anybody going to talk in favor of this? Yes. Is anybody going to side with yes?
I'm going to argue against that.
Is there anybody planning on voting yes on this? I'll let them speak now. We really got to move through this. Craig.
Okay.
Councillor Hodge.
I'm leaning towards yes because I don't want to see front yards being paved to create 3 parking spots across the front yard, and that's what's being suggested. That would be the outcome here. I do agree that you cannot have your tenant parked in the driveway if you've only got a single car driveway. But if you've got a 2-car driveway, there's nothing wrong with having the 3rd car. And I said this at the earlier when we were talking about tandem. To me, it's a question of, do you have 2 unencumbered spaces? That's great. If the 3rd one is behind one of those spots, then I think you've met the requirement of having 3 spaces. My bigger concern is that on Burke, and there's one thing that we haven't discussed in all of this, and that is on the rear load lots, trying to set the garages in such a way that we've got spaces for that extra parking spot so that 24 inches of that parking spot doesn't fall on the neighbor's side of the property line. I think there's still some things that we can do to create extra parking up on Burke Mountain before we tell people they have to pave their front yards to put the 3rd spot in. So I want to make sure if it's a 1-car driveway, then no, that doesn't work for me. But if it's a 2-car driveway, then you should be able to put your wife's car behind your car because you two can swap the keys at 6 in the morning, but the tenant has to have a clear spot, and whether the bylaw says that spot has to be unencumbered, but I don't want to go to the point where we have to start paving over and putting 3 parking spots across the front lawns.
Thank you, Councillor Asmussen.
Well, I'm going to vote yes that we
park beside the husband.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm just illustrating some of the options to provide that 3rd parking space. But if you go back to the question, I apologize. There's the question again.
Mine is no. Yeah. And the reason being is it hasn't worked. It's just not Burke Mountain. And we as a council, for the last number of times, had applications coming in before us with a tandem. We've said, no, that doesn't work. put it on the side, put it here. We've been doing that to all the applications already because we've said, different councillors said, well, what's the turning radius to get around behind that car? How do you get out from that car in tandem or at the back of it? And Dennis is right. It has simply been one of the biggest things that has had the greatest impact on residential areas with all the people, as Terry said, that own a house and have a tenant downstairs in their house are not having their tenant parked behind them because if it's that one person that has to get out that's parked on that side, they're not going to have to be able to get out. It hasn't worked, and it's just not Burke Mountain. We've had developments in Old Coquitlam, all through Coquitlam, where we as council have looked and said, you know, this tandem, we don't want tandem here for this suite. We want to put it along the side, the front. We push some to the side. That's been on multiple developments where we have not, as a council, consistently have been saying, we are not taking this position. So to vote no is being consistent, I believe, for Dennis and I, where council has been when applications come before us on secondary suites and the effect that it has on the neighborhood. I think if you have a garage and you have the tandem where you have a parking pad at the back, that is a separate parking pad for that tenant and it's off the street. But on a front-loaded one there, that was one of the mistakes we made back when we allowed RS7s and we allowed the parking in tandem in that discussion, which goes back where we've had a lot of problems now with the parking on the streets from that. So mine is going to be
Clarify,
no.
please.
Yeah, I've got a question for staff.
Clarify on...
Clarify what just what he said on RS7, because the rest of the city should be that the parking has to be offset. Is it just RS7 that's allowed in town?
On RS7 on front-loaded, it was allowed in the bylaw to have...
Because that question is wrong.
But I'm just saying, if I'm correct, on RS7, you can have a secondary suite with parking on the driveway, right? That's correct.
As you can in the other single-family zones.
Yeah, the single-family zones.
So what we're now asking, and we've taken the words continue to be out because they're confusing, we're just asking the straightforward policy question now. Should secondary suite parking be permitted in tandem? And so far, there's only one person who said yes. Anybody else want to speak who hasn't spoken yet? Councillor Hodge is another.
So this would be citywide. So there's no talk of putting it on restrictions because of the older parts of Coquitlam where we've got 66-foot lots, you can easily put a third spot next to the carport. That works. But on Burke Mountain, on a 40-foot lot where you've got a two-car driveway, you're basically paving from property line to property line. So I'm thinking of the aesthetic look in the permeable soil on the 40-foot lots. I agree that on the wider lots, it makes sense where you can put it. But we're not differentiating between lot size. We're saying that a smaller lot, you're just going to have to pave across the front yard to do it. Whereas on the older lots, I agree, the older parts of Coquitlam, it makes total sense to make sure you've got 3 spots side by side. You've got a 2-car garage, and you've got a walkway going down the side of the house where you can put another car, which would be option A. That works in older Coquitlam, but that doesn't work on Burke.
All right. Everybody's spoken. So should secondary suite parking... I thought you said no, you didn't want to speak.
No, I said I would be quick.
Okay, sure. Go ahead. Councillor Towner. Sorry.
Here we go again, where it depends on the area of the city and the size of the property. But I think the bigger question is whether we can actually require the tenant to use the spot that's provided for them. We have no mechanism in place. So whether it's a tandem spot or the pad, we're hearing so much that the homeowner is parking their boat or their RV there, or just not letting the tenant park there. And during the snow, all the tenants up at the top of Westwood Plateau had nowhere to park. They had to park at Coquitlam Center and take the bus home, because they had no off-street parking and the streets were covered in snow. So how do we can talk about this till the cows come home, but how do we even monitor it? We have nothing in place to ensure.
There are always going to be issues. This is just sort of like fine-tuning it somewhat.
I know. And this is a really good discussion.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's... Mayor Stewart.
But on the plus side, if you allow tandem parking, they're not going to park their boat as the tandem parking spot.
That's true.
Those challenges are the kinds of things. Remember, I raised the possibility of getting a business license to be a landlord, to having a suite, and therefore having a licensing requirement every year, so that we could say to the the tenant, you actually have rights here, and the tenant would come forward and we'd be able to say to the landlord, no, you've got to let the tenant park in the tenant spot, or else we'll take away your license, or something. So, but
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Councillor Zarilla now.
So I read the question totally different than everyone else is reading the question. I was going to go.
Councillor, question 5. Please.
I was going to say, should secondary suite parking? I was going to say no, because the people that own the house should be able to have a tandem. Like, if you've got 3 spots, why shouldn't the people that own the house be able to have a tandem? And so when you said it an hour ago, and I thought, yeah, that's totally makes sense. So I totally read this differently, because this is asking about a secondary suite being in tandem. No, I think the secondary suite parking needs to be unencumbered.
That's right.
But there's no reason why the homeowners can't share.
They can park like
So
that.
that's like no triple tandem, basically, is what that means, right?
No.
So anyway, I was going to say yes to this, but I obviously totally misinterpreted the way that, because the discussion has gone
Well, the
different.
question, we'll do our best we can to
Yes,
clarify and report back.
I plan to do that now. So show of hands, should secondary suite parking be permitted in tandem? All those in favor? Yes. So we have 2 people.
Well, if the homeowners can park.
Yeah, we just changed the reading how to read the question. Should the tandem be tandem?
I'm not.
No, the tandem.
No, this is what this is. I'm sorry.
It's how you count it.
To me, it's pretty clear.
If there's 3 spots.
Well, then, sorry, I
Dictating who has it.
Secondary suite parking. It's secondary suite parking in tandem.
Secondary should not be tandem.
Secondary should not be tandem.
Okay.
you cannot count a tandem parking spot, either the front or the back,
As
for the tenant secondary suite.
That's right.
Just on a point of order, that's not changing the requirement to have 3 parking spots. What the question is saying is that it can't be the tandem. So
That's right. That's what it is.
okay, well, I was reading the question differently, and I agree that the tenant should not be the tandem spot. I agree with that.
That's always been the question.
Okay, no, there isn't a requirement in single family for 2 cars, right? So you could have someone come in with a design that's a 1-car car.
Excuse me.
No, we made it 2.
There's not a requirement in a single-family house to have a 2-car parking
We
garage?
don't have, we can't require, well,
Two parking spaces?
our zones have requirements for a design that includes 2 spaces.
Right.
But one of them is going to be filled with junk. And so there's already going to be.
That's not the issue. We're building 2-car garages for single-family homes, right? That's what happens. That's the minimum. Okay.
Okay,
That's the question.
I'm just saying that if someone comes in with a set of plans and says, "Here's my 2-car garage, and myself and my wife are going to park in tandem, and that's our
That doesn't work.
well, that's what was put.
That works for me. That works for me.
It's never going to happen.
It absolutely works until they actually
If they
move
want the
in.
mortgage helper.
Once they move in, they will change that, and we won't have parking for the tenants.
That's right.
So, how would you interpret it? What would staff say if somebody came in and said, my wife and I are going to park in tandem, and the other space inside the garage or something is for the tenant? What would staff say there?
Oh. In the garage?
Or the other
I'm thinking
unencumbered
the
space?
tenants
It's going to be a
on the
2-car
driveway.
garage.
My wife's in the garage. I'm
Most likely, right?
Tenants
Or
to the
carport
side.
or something. The other space for the tenant. What would
If you need the
staff say?
income, you work it out.
If plans were submitted that showed that parking arrangement, and that parking arrangement met the bylaw definitions and requirements, we would total up the number of spaces and trust them, but they're going to allocate it as they say. So
It would only be allowed in 33% of the cases because of our other question.
No.
that's how
That was only multifamily. It's a single family now.
It's a single family.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks.
Nice try, though.
I'm just trying to roll this along.
Okay, we'll just call
Okay,
it
so let's call a question.
Okay.
All those in favor? Yes.
Okay, just to clarify that, what we're saying is
for secondary suite.
the secondary suite parking spot cannot be in tandem.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, that's a 3
We're
unencumbered
not
spots.
talking about the total number of spots.
Should we permit it to be in tandem? Yes. How many say yes? No. How many say no? Okay. Unanimous, no.
Thank God.
Okay.
Are we
And-
The
done?
last question is, we always, when we change rules, we always give a grace period. So it's a strong recommendation that we should give some kind of notice to people. So
I
that's a yes.
would move that staff come back with
No motions
something reasonable.
Well, sure, well, yeah. This is, all in favor, say, all in favor, yes?
For what, sorry?
Should in-stream applications be exempt from these changes?
Well, we haven't voted on these this change, isn't this going to come in the
For
evening?
changes that we adopt today.
Eventually.
This isn't coming this evening, the report's coming
These are
back later.
straw polls. We will capture all the direction given into a report, and you can vote again at that time.
That counts.
We've got the direction we need. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All in favor, yes?
Yeah,
Opposed? Okay, that's
done.
fine. Now, do we need a motion to receive this report?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Aston, second by Councillor Towner. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
Mr. Chair, we have one other business item.
I would suggest that one other business item is not urgent. It's not as urgent as the other one.
I would suggest as the mover of it that it can be deferred to the next meeting.
Thank you.
If the group feels supportive of that.
Second.
Fine. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Great meeting.